like hit into my temples. And as that happened, there was like a big flash of light in the room, and I felt my entire crown like completely open up, and it was literally like the 1,000-petaled lotus that they talk about in Buddhism. I think it's Hinduism as well. And I felt all these tiny little energetic things opening, and energy just like pouring out of my crown. I was in like quite an altered state of consciousness. I could see this little white light portal opening up, and these beings were coming in and like surrounding me. And it felt like some of these beings were like helping the energetic process, and I was like pulling things out of my neck and like, energetically. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yep, I'm excited for the conversation too. I think it'll be good. So we've got a sort of a where we can jump off is up to you. So you've obviously got your story outlined in those YouTube videos you made, which is I think is really engrossing, and you're a fantastic storyteller. Those are beautiful. Maybe I don't want to make you repeat yourself, you know what I mean, in terms of getting into the context of it for people. So do you reckon two options, you can go into your story a bit as much as you can, but I know obviously it took you 2 parts and some time, and this nuance it does, you know what I mean? You have to do it justice. So we can, if you enjoy telling your story, feel free, go ahead, and it's a beautiful story, but maybe a condensed version or something, just if you want, so you don't have to repeat yourself too much, and we can direct people to that resource to kick off if they want to go deeper or whatever you prefer there in that space, to get the ball rolling a little bit and sort of set the scene.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do a very short version. Yeah, and then we can go into it. Yeah, it is quite tricky to do a short version, but essentially, around about 2008, I started going through, I guess what you call like an awakening experience. I read, there was some books that I was reading at the time. One in particular was the Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. And that was about the parallels between Eastern mysticism and modern physics. And reading that book just triggered something in me. It sparked something in me about like, if the ancient mystics knew what we're now discovering in modern physics, then they must have been onto something, basically. And it triggered this it made me look at some psychedelic experiences as I'd had when I was younger in a bit of a different light, and I felt like, oh, there's something in there that I was missing. And that led me to work with mushrooms for a couple of years in a much more conscious way. And I'd been listening a lot to a guy called Terence McKenna, and he talked about like this heroic dose, 5 dry grams of mushrooms, taken alone in silent darkness on an empty stomach. And over those 2 years, I kind of built up to this experience, and I had a huge breakthrough experience when I did that. And these beings appeared, and like one was like holding my head, and the other one like touched my nose, and this like high-pitched thing came up. And anyway, I started transforming into different animals, and in the moment I was pretty terrified, but once it kind of settled, it settled on this lion tiger feline energy, and it was absolutely incredible. I was like roaring and purring, and like just had these like it was unbelievable experience. And one of the things that happened on that was, it felt like the entire top of my head was open, and energy was just pouring into my body. My body had become like partially see-through. I could see like this glowing orb in my chest, and I was just like full of bliss, and I was getting like past life memories and all sorts of it was obviously like an incredibly powerful visionary experience. I remember one point like just having these belly laughs in like bliss, and there were these energetic like grids of like geometric like cobwebs or something like stretching out as far as I could see, and energy was just like rippling through these grids when I was laughing. And one of the things that this transformation was kind of teaching me was like how the tiger essence, like it knew what it was. It was comfortable in its own energy. And it was just this like power, and it was fully embodied. And I got this realization of like, wow, I'm like constantly in my head. Like I was so not in my body at that time. And the other thing it was kind of showing me was this is the potential for humanity. If we can become our true selves, like fully embodied, like human beings are magical, amazing creatures. And so I had that experience, and looking back on that, I've spoke about this before, like, but I think I didn't realize at the time, but I think I had a top-down Kundalini Awakening during that mushroom experience, because afterwards my life completely shifted. The observer state of consciousness like really came online in an extremely strong way after that experience, and huge amounts of synchronicity were like flowing into my life, kind of referencing that experience.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is obviously like a really short version. There's a lot to say about all these different things. But like you said, I do have videos on these different things. So
and we'll link those so people can go and get the full flavor. Yep.
Yeah, people can go into that. But so 6 months after that, with all these kind of synchronicities that had been going on, and just my life opening up in just a very magical way, I was watching a presentation by a guy called Bruce Lipton, which was called The Biology of Belief, Where Mind and Matter Meet. And it was all about epigenetics and how the environment our cells are in affects the genetic expression of the cells. And that environment includes your thoughts and beliefs, because, our thoughts and our beliefs affect our biology. They affect us chemically. Obviously, if you're angry and stressed, there's different chemicals flowing in the body. And I'd had a chest infection when I was 18, and I was in hospital for a bit with that, and then it carried on for a couple of years, and I was just coughing all the time. And at the time, I was not doing very healthy activities, let's say. Every weekend, and I was in a band, and I was kind of in that sort of lifestyle, and it really damaged the muscle tissue, especially around my left lung. My posture was really out. Like, I can't remember which shoulder it was now, but one of my shoulders were like really like held up all the time. I think it was this one. So damage all around like the myofascia tissue and the muscles. And I was in like a low level of background pain from the age of like around about 18 until 20. So I'm 27 at this point that I'm talking about. Yep. 6 months on from that mushroom experience. And I just got this realization, which was a massive revelation for me at the time. And it was, why have I still got this damaged tissue? Why is there still this pain in my body, when essentially every cell in my body has been regenerated? Because every 7 years, I believe they said, like, you're cellular, you're entirely new every 7 years. And this was like, at that point, at least 10 years ago from the initial thing. And I just got this realization that it's like, you're holding on to the memory, you're revivifying it through constantly like, oh, my back's in pain, like all these stories that I was telling my body. And I didn't fully get this bit at the time, but I think it started to open the doorway that there's an emotional component to it that I never felt, because I realized that chest infection, at the time I just thought, oh, I've just got a chest infection. But I realized there was a really big trauma event in my life around that time, and that chest infection was a direct result of that. Anyway, so I was just lying down in bed after watching this video, and I was speaking to my cells in just like this really deep, heartfelt dialogue, just telling them that it was okay and that we could heal, and that I think I said the line something like, we came together in this lifetime for a reason, like we can do this, and know we can heal. And I just fully believed it in that moment. Like there was no question that this was possible for me. And I
Pure intent
felt,
sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, really, really pure, and like the depth of like the heart connection that I had as well with my body. It was, I think that was really important. And I felt in that moment for like maybe 15 to 20 seconds fully healed. I felt like my body had restructured. It felt like the pain had gone. And I had like a visionary experience of like this energy kind of coming down onto my body. Anyway, I fell asleep, and then I woke up in the middle of that night, and there was this intense electrical, it was like I'd just been, like this electrical clasp had just been zapped around my leg, and I felt energy moving up and down my leg internally, and I was like, what? I can't believe it. I'd never felt anything like that in my life. I was really sick, got back into bed, and then I could just feel it moving more. And then I woke up the morning afterwards, and this energy was like moving other places. And I was just like, oh my God, I've triggered some kind of healing process in my body, because it started to feel like it was like stretching a little bit internally, like some of the muscle tissue and things.
Yeah.
And yeah, to cut like a long story really short, over about a period of a week, this got like stronger and stronger. It started feeling like I wanted, anytime I kind of like relaxed, it was like moving me quite gracefully at first, and
Yeah.
sometimes like dancing me. I would like be dancing in ways that I didn't even know that I could dance. It was almost like Michael Jackson or something, like just really fast like movements with the feet and things. And it kind of got to this point after about a week where it reached a bit of at least an initial climax. And it was at nighttime, and I was staying at a friend's house, because I'd started to get a bit overwhelmed by the intensity of what was happening, and a bit like I wouldn't say scared, but I was just a bit overwhelmed by like how strong this energy had started to become in the body. And I went to chat with I went to stay with my friends, because they were somewhat on the spiritual path, so I thought I could like speak to them a little bit about it. And anyway, that night I had a massive crown chakra opening from the bottom up. So there was a point where I felt like the really strong channels sort of weaving up my spine, but there were all these areas where the energy couldn't really flow cleanly, and it was like hitting into like rocks in my body. But it did manage to kind of like do the sort of weaving around the spine, and I felt the energy channels like come out of my, it was like it came out of my, just out of my physical body, and then they just like hit into my temples. And as that happened, there was like a big flash of light in the room, and I felt my entire crown like completely open up, and it was literally like the 1,000-petaled lotus that they talk about in Buddhism, I think it's Hinduism as well. And I felt all these tiny little energetic things opening, and energy just like pouring out of my crown. I was in like quite an altered state of consciousness. I could see this little white light portal opening up, and these beings were coming in and like surrounding me. And it felt like some of these beings were like helping the energetic process, and I was like pulling things out of my neck and energetically. And so that was like, that was a huge experience for me, obviously. And like I felt so blissful and high in a sense, like in the days following. And then there was quite an interesting little thing that happened, which I think is worth just touching on. Mm-hmm. I think it was about 4 or 5 days after that, I went back home. I was living in Manchester at the time, and I had so much fear coming up, partly around the intensity of the process, because it was starting to really take over my body in ways that were quite alarming. It was getting difficult to not do the kriya, not have these kriyas are like spontaneous, and
being possessed is the only words that we have for it in the language.
Kind of, exactly. And also there was this huge amount of fear about, I told all my friends about this, and like it was like the 1 or 2 of my friends who maybe were like slightly open to it because they did yoga or something. Like one of them did yoga, but basically nobody I knew at that time was in any way what you might call spiritual or
Yeah.
open to any of this kind of stuff. And I just had all this fear coming up of, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm insane. Like, what's happening to me? Is this a negative process? Like, because as I say, it was getting really overwhelming. And in that moment, I felt all the energy like drain out of my system. Like it was like there was the sparkling everywhere, the currents, the movements, and it all drained out. And then I felt the two kind of bigger channels like come down, and then about an inch below my physical spine, I felt this energy coil around itself, and then it was just like poof, it was just shut off.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, what? And I can't remember the timeline completely. It's a little bit blurred at this point because this is quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I remember being pretty like distraught. I was like, oh my God, my fear has aborted this process that I'd triggered.
Yeah.
So each night for about a week after that, I just got into this meditative state again, talking to myself. And I remember one night just saying, Spirit, God, Source, if this is my path, then I'm ready to walk it. And then the energy just awoke again. And that was 2010. And it's stayed on since then. And in the month in the month or so following that reawakening, it just got stronger and stronger and stronger, more and more powerful. I was starting to have massive energetic purges. It was bringing up old emotions. I would have like visionary experiences when the energy was like kept ripping through these like physical knots and blockages. Sometimes it'd be like drilling and pressure in the head, like burning sensations, and I mean, you name it, like all sorts. And it, oh yes, so sometimes I would like see like what this blockage was related to, like in a sort of third eye vision, and then it would like dot onto all these different events that were somehow connected, and it was like they was pulling these threads out, and with this kind of thread, it was like showing, oh, that was then tied to that happened later on. And but anyway, it got so powerful, and so much was coming up simultaneously. I became completely fatigued. I was it started to get more and more painful. I started to get more and more afraid in some ways. There was an ego level of me that started to get really afraid. There was a part of me there was like a higher part that was like, it's okay, this is a healing process. And that stayed with me like throughout the whole journey. And I went into a very long and very intense, very brutal, very painful journey with Kundalini for, I mean, at least the first 7 years were very, very difficult. And then I would say the first 10 relay were difficult. And I ended up being bedbound for the first couple of years, just like being in bed with just the energy, just like kind of raging through me, and just getting up, shuffling around the house. Luckily, I lived with some friends, so they were making food for me and things, because I was just completely incapable of looking after myself at that point. I went back to my parents for a little bit. And it was absolutely brutal for a long time. I was literally in extreme pain, pretty much 24 hours a day. I would wake up in extreme pain, because the energy, it was like there was glue in, like it was almost like the muscles were gluing. It was just like ripping them apart internally. I had times when it felt like there were like razor blades like cutting into my spine, fire burning into my brain. I remember one time feeling like all these, like, it felt like just like worms were just like channeling into my brain, and it was intense, extreme head pressures. I mean, the list of sort of symptoms in inverted commas is pretty much endless. But it was really, really difficult. And because I was bedbound for quite a long time, my physical body also suffered in the sense of like muscle atrophy, I think that's how we say it.
That's it.
So kind of as it started to ease off a little bit after the first couple of years, and when I say ease off, like only very slightly, it was still extremely, extremely strong. I started to be able to just kind of go for little walks again. But for me, like I could, for a long time, I could turn my head like about that much, because I think it's because my posture was so out of alignment and there was so much damage in the muscle tissues, and this energy wants an aligned, I think a J-shaped spine actually, but it's literally like realigning my posture, breaking through all these physical blockages, which are all tied to emotional energy blockages as well. So it was a really, really difficult path for me in that way, and I had to like rebuild my strength physically as well. And every step of that way, whether it be walking a little bit at first and then cycling and swimming, each part of it was very, very painful and very, very difficult. I had to swim with like one of these snorkel things because I couldn't turn my neck to breathe and stuff like that. So it was like a huge, huge journey around that. And so just sort of finishing that point. It was taking me as well as kind of the physical stuff. It was really taking me into all my shadow, all the trauma in this lifetime and other lifetimes. There's like spontaneous entity removals. I mean, maybe we can get into like some of the things that go on in the process a bit more, but that's kind of a very brief overview of my journey. I think another big thing actually that I'll just touch on was lucid dreaming. I had thousands of lucid dreams in that period when I was bedbound, especially, and there was huge amounts of healing done in the dream space. And then, just one other important thing to say, I think. So after those first 3 years, I essentially, for about 7 years, spent pretty much 3 hours every day just surrendering into the kriyas, and it was moving me, putting me in yoga postures, stretching in the most precise ways, and there'd be some little release of tension, for example, in my wrist, which would then move to my head, and there'd be like
you get things where you can feel like individual nerve fibers being peeled like through fascia and things like that, like one nerve up will get peeled all the way along and traced all back to its root, but it's literally feels like one fiber, like it's like and I've had times where it'll move like, take about half an hour to move about 2 inches, and it's literally like pulling like one little, I don't know, bit of fascia or so, it feels like a hair, like the length of a human hair, and you can feel it trace all the way up where the nerve goes. You know what I mean? It's incredibly precise.
Yeah. It's so precise and delicate, and also like raw and powerful, and sometimes it's like that full spectrum, and then after that kind of 10-year period, then I slowly started to kind of come back into the world and doing the things that I'm doing now. So it's an incredible journey. You know what I mean? Your journey with it, even the way that it began. It like a volitional sort of thing, you know what I mean? Because mine, and I think a lot of times it's spiritual practices and things, and it's just below the surface. But yours was literally almost like you were like, it's time to go. You know what I mean? Like it's like a talk and a conscious intent, which a lot of spiritual teachers talk about being the most important thing. A sincere intent to wake up is worth more than 20 Vipassana retreats or anything like that. You know what I mean? If you're serious in your soul, in your connection to I want to wake up, or I want to know the truth, or I want to heal, it's a really powerful, it almost speaks to the dreamlike nature of this. You know what I mean? It's like when you switch your intent, the whole thing just opens up. You know what I mean? It's like Bruce Almighty, all the cars part, everything. It's just, they were waiting for you to have that intent is what it feels like, from that. And interestingly, the intersection between your story, early on, I saw your Terrence videos and I saw your mushroom trips and things. This is years and years ago. And I remember thinking they were really awesome. And I was dabbling in going through the same sort of process. You know what I mean? It's a similar sort of timelines, and except I'm just behind, you know what I mean? A little bit behind, but on the same trajectory. And I remember seeing your Kundalini video and me being oriented, intellectualized in the head, that sometimes those are the people that really reach for psychedelics because they need a strong hammer to smash open the over analyzing intellect. And I remember seeing that and being like,
man, like what happened to James? Like he's gone crazy. You know what I mean? And you know, the cosmic giggle of it, you know, like you are having that experience of like, oh no, everyone's going to think I'm going crazy. And they do, because they don't even know. Even the people that are spiritual, they don't even like, even if you had a good close knit group of spiritual friends, this is over the heads of most of them. You know what I mean? That they meditate and they, you know what I mean? And various different things. And, you know what I mean? The spiritual thing that marketplace can have all sorts of things, from the mind so open that the wind whistles between the ears to, you know, just Vipassana, really heady sort of Silicon Valley, you know, it's a whole thing. But I remember having that experience and being like, James I hope he pulls out of that. Like, I don't know what's going on. He's off the rails. And then, you know, cosmic giggle, I then later on had my own experience and then came back and was like, what was he saying about that? You know, like it was a full circle sort of experience.
Right.
But it is really scary. Like, I think that's worth hovering on. Early on, I was terrified, and I didn't even know about Kundalini. I just naively went to a Vipassana retreat, had a practice for a couple of years, thought I might deepen my meditation practice, and I was really, at first, terrified. It felt sacred, and I allowed space for it and everything like that, but just the power of the energy in the body is terrifying. Like, it feels dangerous, and other people seeing it, it looks dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your neck? Like, you're gonna hurt yourself. Like, and I remember I had experiences early on where, and I think that's something worth mentioning. In your accounts, you sort of feel like you had a bunch of damage, and I'm sure you did to some degree, but I think there's more in there than you think. I think there's a ton in there from just living in everyone, you know what I mean? Because there's this, like, in my neck, and there's just so much in there, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems really intense and profound, the amount of energy and just how bound up things can be. You know what I mean? It's really mind blowing how much is in there. And
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't believe I couldn't and still can't believe how much shit I was carrying, basically. You know,
yeah,
like prior to the Kundalini Awakening, I thought like, oh yeah, I'm all right. You know, like,
yeah,
but the depth of pain and trauma and physical damage that I was holding, it absolutely blew my mind with Kundalini. Like, I still really can't believe like how I was existing like that before, and feeling somewhat all right, because it showed. Yeah, it's mind blowing.
Was there a period early on with you with lots of gross blockages? Like, early on for me, there was like these several different points throughout my body, this left shoulder, 4 or 5 of them where there was a huge surrender, you know, like arm pinned behind the back, on the side, different thing. And when I finally melted into some of these gross blockages, there was tears and laughter and a whole head to toe shaking, full trauma response. Like, there was these gross ones, and then there was a lot, like, they were like, almost felt like plexuses of nerves, like a highways of fascia and nerves and things that were all bundled up. You know what I mean? And these gross blockages were obscene, and they had really big emotional components to them. But as the process unfolded, that seemed to get less and less, and it moved to a subtler and subtler sort of experience. Was that your experience too, with the really big ones that had big emotions and really a lot of it in there, and then it would go into more of finer detail sort of thing?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, definitely. I think it would sometime. I would say one thing I would say just on that is like I sometimes thought I'd cleared those like really big ones, but then like I'd later find out, oh no, there was like there's another layer there. But definitely there were big key areas that were very problematic early on, and for me, it did take a long time to get through some of those. I would say like the first 8 to 10 years, I was still really digging into some of those big areas. But then there were other areas that it was much more easeful, and they were just more minor releases. And now I still do have some. I still do experience kriyas, and it's been like the top of my spine, right where it sits into the head and into the jaw. That's seemingly like the main area that it still works on, but it's all very manageable. And it's a long time since I've experienced any of it as painful.
Did it stop invading your your day-to-day experience when it stopped being such a pressing thing? Like, was that correlational, or it still does try? If you let go of volitional control now, it'll still try to get in. And but does it? There's that, and then does it invade even when you don't want it? Because at the moment, mine still invade, like when I'm driving and different things, and any time when I let go of control, it begins immediately. But even with when I'm trying to have volitional control and do something else, it'll leak in. You know what I mean? If it needs to, and I haven't been giving it enough attention and enough time, sort of thing.
Yeah, so it doesn't do it when I'm like 100% focused on something else. But if I was to like fully relax now and allow it, there would be some.
It'd start going.
Krias that start up as soon as I lie down in bed. It starts doing its thing.
You still make time for it?
No, not really. Sometimes small amounts of time during the day. Sometimes I will if I'm feeling it a little bit. But mainly I just let it do its work at night while I'm asleep, and in the sort of preceding half an hour before going to sleep, it does. And the other time I find that it does quite a lot at the moment is when I'm waking up. So luckily I'm in a position where I barely ever have to set an alarm clock. So I get to have like, when I wake up and then kind of drift back to sleep a little bit and kind of go into that half sleep space, I'll find that I keep coming in and out of sleep and wake consciousness, maybe for like 40 minutes. And often as I'm like waking up, there'll be like quite a big release going on. When I say quite big, not comparative to what it was like 10, 15 years ago, but but yes, it's definitely still refining and still working on me.
But it's progressed through that sort of thing of getting more and more refined as you go. But and that seems to be clear from what you're saying there. And I get what you're saying, and I appreciate that the order in which it does, it'll constantly revisit, right? You know what I mean? Like there's only so much you can get out of this left shoulder with your neck how it is. And then we'll do a bit of neck, but then we'll go back down to your hip because your neck was trapping this bit of your sciatic nerve here, and we couldn't even touch this until you got these two vertebrae. They were actually fused together somehow. Let's crack those apart. And, like it's that whole, it's like surgical in its precision, more complex than surgery. Surgery isn't even the right metaphor. It's like more precise than surgery. Surgery is a blunt instrument compared to this. Like it really is. And that's a good point to discuss. Has there been points that just blew your mind even again, like from this? Because I had certain experiences where a couple times throughout my life I've had like positional vertigo where I've been doing stupid stuff like working and in a weird position for hours, and I'll get like the crystals in your inner ear get out of whack, you know what I mean? And you have to do this sort of head movements and things. Like there's a maneuver you can do to fix it. And I had like something like that when the process was going about a year ago, and I tried the maneuvers, but I did it wrong. And I did this side and then this side. There's two different sides you can do for each ear, and I mixed it up, and I had such bad vertigo that I was like vomiting. Like it was all out of whack, and I was so nauseous and it was so unpleasant. It's like, 9 out of 10 unpleasant, this state of like you're spinning, and it's like being really drunk, but worse. And it's like just, you're just normal. And so it's pretty intolerable. I surrendered into it and let the body take over, and it did the move better than I knew how to do it, and sorted it out in one. You know what I mean? And it was like super intense. Like when you do it and move the crystals, everything spins. And I've had a couple of experiences like that. Another one where it was, and how it doesn't make a mistake, you know what I mean? Because like when you're dealing with, your neck in a crazy position, your sort of legs folded over my head and trying to reach even further out in here, and my chest is fully collapsed, and we're working with millimeters and it's doing crazy stuff. It doesn't make mistakes. And so one night it dropped me onto my shoulder and like jarred into my neck on that side. And I was like, oh, that was super weird. Like why, like what the hell? You know what I mean? Like it was so out of tune for it, because it never slips up, you know what I mean? And I kept doing the movements, whatever, went down to brush my teeth later on in the night and just sort of out of habit, I don't know why, spat in the sink. It was full of blood. And I was like, holy shit. And then I went, just coughed up, full of blood. And I was like, oh no. I went up to the hospital. We've got one near my house. I was like, I'm having sort of like, I've got a medical background. There's a million things that entered my head at that point. And the dude looked in the back of my throat and was like, there's a bit of like white, like it looks like a bit of pus there. Like you've obviously got a sore throat. Not, when you've got a sore throat. My throat was fine. And then I was sitting there and all of a sudden I put it all together and it was like, it's dropped me on that side and popped like a cyst, or you know what I mean? Like something in there that was long standing and it was intentional to jar and jolt. It's the only way that you would probably be able to do that. You know what I mean? And that had bled a bit down into my throat and things like that. But it was minor in the scheme of things. And as soon as I just left, as soon as I realized that happened, he's like, yeah, you got a sore throat. And I was like, I don't, but that sort of wisdom is like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like it can, have there been moments like that for you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I think those kind of ones are sometimes, I mean, I got very proficient at surrendering into them, but they're the ones I think that the ego mind like struggles to surrender into. For example, there's a couple of things that are coming up for me when you're saying that. There was one time that it put my leg into such an intense cramp, my left leg, and by this point I'm like, this is quite a few years in, so I'm like, I know I've just got to like sit with this position that it's put me in, and it got so intense in the leg that it actually tore the muscle. And I couldn't walk. I couldn't put any weight on that leg for like a week. And to like the ego mind, that's like, oh my God, it's just like it's literally ripped my muscle apart in my leg.
So it is killing me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Finally got justification. But the wisdom in me knew that like, it is worth ripping a little bit of muscle in the leg in order to fix something else that it needed to do. And I just knew that was why it had done it. So I was so interested at that point. But on the face of it, that those can be really quite alarming, and definitely like throwing me into different positions. I couldn't even sleep on. I couldn't even lay on my side for a long period of time. But there became a point after about 7 years when it first put me onto my left-hand side, and I was like, oh my God, there was so much relief that I could finally lay on my side for the first time. But it would have me in these strange positions for quite a long time. And yeah, I mean, I've had the most violent things with my neck as well. But the other one that springs to mind is as well, I don't know if... in Britain anyway, at school, like I can't remember what age it is, maybe like 15, they inject you with some vaccine. I can't even remember which one it is. But often people get like this like lump that swells up, and it's really pretty disgusting. And I had so there was like a scar from that vaccine, and it was slightly raised and slightly hard. And there was points during the kriyas where it was like Kundalini was like taking my finger, just like, and just like sticking it into it, like, and it reopened this wound, and like all this like pus and stuff was coming out of it. From like this vaccine from, I don't know how many years ago, many years ago. And I also felt this. From this point, this kind of like I saw it as like this black kind of energy that went up into my brain from this point, and then right down into it was actually into my left testicle, and it was like pulling this energy out. So it reopened this kind of site, and all this physical stuff came out of it, and energetic. And then also above it, I also, when I was just born, I had like some vaccines that caused my whole upper arm to swell. And there was quite a lot of scar tissue around there, and similar things happened to that. There wasn't like pus coming out that one, but it would like dig my hand in, and then sometimes even like just nipping it and stuff, and like, just like there was a dint in the muscle tissue, which pretty much no longer exists. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, isn't it? And on that fear vein, I had early on in the neck. It had to do really deep stuff, and I don't know whether it was me resisting because I wasn't fully into I didn't always perfectly surrender. Sometimes it would take time, and I would hang out in a spot, and I'd be hanging on for way longer than was needed. You know what I mean? It'd drop my head way down low on those sides and over the back. I wanted to, but yeah, on that vein, I was just sort of saying that it's there was bits early on where it would really drop my head into these crazy positions and sensory nerves went numb. Like I had like up the whole left side of my head and my left ear go numb, and then it did the same thing to the right side. And that's similar to what you're saying there. Of obviously yours is probably a little bit more extreme of an example, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that it could rip a muscle that it needed to and be like, that'll grow back. We need to do some work over here. You know what I mean? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet sort of thing. It has that, the energy has that approach in there. Like it's a very stern, like, and very, can be very, very uncomfortable because it'll just push you. It seems to be the art of surrender, really. Like it's trying to absolutely maximize, because it takes you to the place in your body. No one wants to be even present in their body, and it takes you in that presence to the absolute worst place that you could look, and then just rubs your nose in it until you just melt away and totally surrender into that. And I think that there's an element there of, if you could surrender to that, there's nothing you couldn't surrender to. Do you know what I mean? Like that is the art of surrender. Like if you can be present and be still with your deepest pain and the most discomfort and in the areas that you're the most tender, and both in the body, mind, emotionally, physically, energetically, a toxin, you know what I mean? Most damaged, most sensitive, like the area you would most guard, if you can be brought there and totally envelop it with an open heart, like, because that's what it seems like you have to do, really melt. You have to become one with the pain and the tension, and because it wants every last fiber to surrender to it. You know what I mean? Like if you're just hanging on to that little bit, that's not enough. You know what I mean? Yeah. It won't settle for that. It's got to be, you've got to be total equanimity with this pain. And so it seems like that is a really powerful practice for that surrender. And, it brings on that, it seems to be bringing you to that non-duality, that Eckhart Tolle sort of that he's all about surrender. You know what I mean? And this seems to be the actual physical practice of the body just guiding you to surrender over and over and over and over and over again. And that seems to really change your day-to-day experience. Does that resonate? Does that seem like it's where it's leading?
Absolutely, yeah. I think surrender is the key thing that the key thing that this teaches, really. Surrender. I think surrender and patience and self-compassion. But yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you're saying. It pushes you to the absolute edge points. I think. There was this line, I've mentioned this in a few videos, but I think it's really profound for this experience, I think. And I got it as like an audible line sort of spoken to me very early on in the Kundalini process. And it said, in order to find the point of balance, you need to know where the edges are. And I think that is, it's pushing you into those absolute depths of pain, whatever it is, and surrendering into that, and into the heights of like bliss. You're experiencing that as much as a human being possibly can, which potentially, that could be everything, but to feel the full spectrum of life and the universe and what existence and what is, all those different things, and like stretching out, and eventually you kind of coming back to this more like still point within that. But you've got to go to those other places, and it's like I'm very, as brutal and difficult as it was, like I'm very, very grateful for that learning, because it's changed me on such a fundamental level. And it puts, I was just going to say, well, yeah, it puts you in, like, the ultimate surrender and the ultimate fear, I guess, in life is death. And it brings you very, very close to that edge in a lot of ways, or it did for me, which is very, very liberating. It's very liberating to live a life after kind of touching those places.
Yeah.
because you're free of a lot of the things that previously were running your life in ways that you weren't even aware of.
Yeah, yeah, pain. We ran from pain. We spend our whole lives running from pain, and this is an absolute celebration of pain. You know what I mean? It's a really, it really almost changes what pain is for you. You know what I mean? I had the crazy experience of I was, and I don't really know what I'm doing on that front, so maybe it's a little irresponsible. But with my wife, I was just sometimes I just experiment and see what happens there, and it does different things, and tantrically and all these sorts of things, and it was able to. It does these tantric processes in me, and I'd like to talk to you about your experience there. But it'll work with sexual energy. That's a powerful one that it likes to work with in terms of redirecting it. You know what I mean? It uses that as a way to build energy and then pushes it into places to accelerate the clearing. You know what I mean? That seems to be what it's very comfortable doing. And there was experience along that vein with me and my wife, and it went to her spot. It would build the energy in her, and then it went to the spot that she needed to surrender into. And she's like, that's painful. And I was like, I had this really pause realization moment, and I'm like, yeah, it'd be excruciating. You know what I mean? And then she's like, I don't want that. And I was like, that's interesting. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing because I'd become so like pain seeking in a way. You know what I mean? Like I'll go upstairs and spend 4 hours in my pain. You know what I mean? And totally. And some bits almost seem like pleasure, and there is ecstatic states and things like that come up, but most of it is pain. You know what I mean? Like there's certain bits that are by contrast very pleasant, but they're just, normal stretching and things that it does in between the absolute blasts of agony. You know what I mean? In terms of, and mine didn't have as much of the just background, or not yet, fingers crossed, and I'm only early days, compared to you, but mine didn't have a lot of that, constant pain on me, bedridden. It's all been a process of it's an optional up to this point. You know what I mean? It's if you go in here, it's extreme pain. You know what I mean? 10 out of 10 pain at times, and yeah, it's just it showed me how much I'd been sort of frog boiled in a pot of water into absolute comfort in this pain. And then her saying that really sort of woke me up to like, oh yeah, this is horrific in terms of the pain, but it's a beautiful part of the process. Like I've almost come to really respect it, and it's not what I thought it was. Like it's like a bit of a phantom in that sense of you spend your life running from pain and not wanting any of it. And then you realize when you turn and look, it wasn't what you thought it was. Like there's a beauty and a gift to it. You know what I mean? And you've spoken somewhat on that in terms of the system holding itself together. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing else it could do. There's a love in the pain almost. Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, well, yeah, I mean, you've kind of said it as good as I can, I think. There is a love in the pain because I think the structures that it put on my body, for example, were holding it together. It was the reason the pain is communicating something to you, and you can either choose to listen to that or you can push it further away, and pushing it further away is just essentially it makes it build up more and more. But choosing to dialogue with it and choosing to move into it, it's teaching you something basically. So surrendering into pain as a teacher is a very important practice during Kundalini Awakenings. And yeah, like there is, it's definitely changed me in the sense that if ever I feel any like emotional thing building up, I'm moving into that now. Like I'm just going to go straight into that, allow myself to feel it and fully express it. Because I've experienced pain. I don't know. It's like, I wouldn't want to go back and experience that level of pain again, to be honest. Like, so there is part of me that is like, if somebody said I had to go and do that 10, 15 years again, I mean, I can't even. I would probably want to like kill myself, to be honest. Yeah. Like I wouldn't want to go into those depths of pain again. But
Would you
I'm
change your
extreme.
path if you could? Like, would you? You
100%.
wouldn't erase that. No, no.
No, absolutely not. Like, I'm so grateful for it. It's
Yeah,
like, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
yeah.
But yeah,
I think that's like everything in life. When you live well, you don't want to do it again, but you wouldn't change a thing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
true.
it's yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like I wouldn't want to go and do any of my life again. Like I don't have any of that nostalgia for wanting to slow down time or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like
that's
it's
true.
beautiful, but yeah, you know what I mean? It's a
Yeah,
I wouldn't do any of it again, even the good stuff, because it just seems like it just that just doesn't enter the radar. You know what I mean? But I
yeah,
appreciate what you're saying there, and I think you really went through the most extreme sort of version, even of this incredibly rare process. I think you went through an incredibly painful variant of it as well. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And for whatever reason, that was your path. So it's maybe easier for me to speak to that than you. You know what I mean? And get a bit romantic about the pain, but you know, it's definitely it's one of those things where it does change your relationship with it.
yeah.
And on the
And
on the you
I
go.
was just going to say, like, I think I definitely came to treat pain as sacred. Like, even like, I won't go into the details of the specifics, but I had like a very, very deep, emotionally painful experience a few years ago,
Yeah.
and like in the shedding of that, in the tears, in the like, I mean, like just like dropping into, it almost seems like really over dramatic looking back at it in some ways, but it was how the body wanted to deal with that at the time. Like
Yeah.
I remember just collapsing into the earth in so much emotional pain and just like pouring out of my heart and like opening my heart and blasting out. Really, it was like that pain was like an aspect of like of a heart opening for me, but
Yeah.
like in that shedding and in those tears and stuff, like there's definitely part of me that is now attuned to like, oh my God, this is horrible and overwhelmingly beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're really feeling that. And were you always a sensitive person, James? Like, because I think that this path seems to be a prerequisite. Like, you
Yeah.
feel intensely, and
Yeah.
this is an interesting point here. I just thought of and sort of discovered and stumbled into yesterday. But I was looking up stuff in relation to sleep, and I'm a long sleeper. I've always been a long sleeper, like 10 hours. You know what I mean? And some people are like, oh, what the hell? I only need 4 or whatever, you know, and it's like, I sleep for like 10 and a half. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a long time. I always have. And I made a connection where on retreat, and even me on retreat, only needs 4 or 5 hours, like when I'm on a meditation retreat. And
Right.
people who enter into the awakened state, a deep sort of non-dual realization, often report their sleep needs halved. You know what I mean? From 10 to 5 hours. And it made me realize all in an instant, the sensitivity is the reactions and the reverberations and the load of being so sensitive and processing the world so deeply means you build up all more, like, because all sleep is the clearing of cognitive metabolic byproducts. You know what I mean? It's like how you've been reacting to the world, and the more sensitive you are, the more conditionings, the more pain, the more substance abuse, the more this, the more suffering, the more spiritual awakening tendencies as well. You know what I mean? But it seems to be that if you're not reacting and you're feeling deeply and you're not reacting, you burn so much less energy. Like, all of our energy is wasted in that process of, you know, you got this pain and this heart open and you're exploding and you collapse to the earth. Resisting that would use 10 times the energy. You know what I mean? This is just what needs to come out of you. You know what I mean? So that's the efficient way. And so there's a really interesting connection there with everyone who has these bodily awakenings is sensitive. You know what I mean? And I think it's just a critical mass of you need less life to build up that level of pain and suffering where it's excruciating and it has to hit its critical mass. Everyone would hit a critical mass, you know what I mean? And so I think there's other factors as well, but I think that's a big one of, I don't think my body could have taken much more like tension and pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was, when I found my way to my first ayahuasca ceremonies, I was suicidal. You know what I mean? I was done. Like, I was wrung out and tense and just I was really, I couldn't handle much more in the system. You know what I mean? And then it didn't take much meditation practice and things like that for it just to all start coming out the other way. And that's been so beautiful to then be able to, like, when I was first trying to sit meditate, like, 15 years ago or whatever, I was about to have a panic attack just sitting in my body. You know what I mean? I have the thing that I bring up sometimes when I went into my first ayahuasca ceremony. They said, all right, we're going to drink your ayahuasca now. We're going to sit quietly in the dark for 40 minutes and wait for it to come on. And I was like, fuck, I don't know if I can sit in the dark for 40 minutes. You know what I mean? And like that, just sitting with myself was excruciating because there was so much pain and tension, and it was so hard for me to drop in and inhabit my body. But, and this is a good segue, I think, I can inhabit my body now, and it's beautiful and it's peaceful, and it's still painful in spots, and there's still pain and when the energy moves through me, but it's incredibly to be able to come home to the body and be in the body. Previously, I'd only been able to experience that on psychedelics. Now that's my waking state, being able to come into the body. And it seems like, I get caught up in the physical process of it a bit, but it's all, the cash value of it all is the mind. I can be more conscious because you're conscious from the center of the body. That's your vessel and your receptacle to be present and have awareness in this world. And that seems to be the bit that's really changing. There's more space in the body, which means my field of awareness can expand out more. It's less contracted. And that's changing my perceptions and my relationship to reality. So what do you think the ultimate, like, it's not just a physical process here, obviously it's a spiritual process, but is it changing the way you relate to reality on the day-to-day? Like, are you able to be more present because you can embody your body more because it's less filled with conditionings and trauma and tension?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very embodied, like 99% of the time, and I feel really in the body, and I also feel the separation between the outside world and the body is, it's kind of I can't think of the word. No, that's wrong. Anyway, yeah, like while I feel extremely embodied, I also feel so much part of the world as well. So there is like there's a strong embodiedness, and then also just a feeling of the allness of me and this is all one flowing thing.
I know.
And I think, yeah, like what I'm doing now, which is, well, I do a fair few things, but the main thing that I'm doing is running a spiritual kind of wellness center with my partner.
I saw that video. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really big space. It's like a 3-floor converted Methodist church. All sorts of things going on there. Ceremonies. We've got a cafe. We've got float tanks. Yeah, all this thing. And I don't believe for a second that I would be able to be doing that in any way as well as I manage now, like prior to this, because of the level of embodiment, because of the level of peace and compassion and understanding and just presence that I can bring to that, because I'm dealing with so many different things continuously, like people's emotions, like community, running a business. Like I go from like last night, for example, I was like cleaning the sauna and the toilets to like doing the books to holding a shamanic breathwork ceremony, all doing all these different things all over the place with all these different, like, which all require kind of like different levels of consciousness, and having that kind of anchor into the body. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like, sometimes I still get triggered every now and again. I get a little bit stressed and stuff because there's a lot to do. But having that real anchor into my being, it makes that a lot less challenging, and just allows me to do it in a way that seems to be working. So
yeah, you can drop in and you can catch those contractions early. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Previously, you walk around and you're contracted for 3 days, and you got to have someone sit you down and be like, what's going on? You're insufferable. You know what I mean? And it's like, but now it's like, and even where I'm at on the process and early on, just being able to inhabit my body that bit more makes the world of difference in terms of being able to catch, like, oh, I'm resistant. Like, I'm really resistant. Like, what am I resisting? And sometimes it takes you by surprise. You're resisting nothing. Like you can, like there can be so much conditionings and things here where you can be reacting to something good that you planned or whatever. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, I gotta go do this thing, and it's like this is the only thing you want to do. You know what I mean? But it's like that level of you can catch yourself and wake up from that dream,
Yeah,
and you're like, this is beautiful. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. You get to because going through like the Kundalini journey, you've shed, almost everything that was there before. Like when something comes in, like say you might start to feel. For me, a recent example is I started to feel like, oh, there's like a bit of shielding coming up over my heart. Like I'd just very quickly like started to feel it coming in, and and then I'm like, okay, what can I do about this? I'm going through a process to clear it, and catching, you mentioned Eckhart Tolle earlier, but like catching like being in the witness state of consciousness, so watching when these stories start coming in and these like loops, and sometimes even like really old patterns, and like, oh wait a minute, that's just like creeping in a little bit, but catching it early and witnessing it, and either purging the emotional component by like, it could be just letting yourself like let some anger out or whatever it is. I think that the anchor of the body really allows you to catch those things very quickly.
Yeah, it's contingent upon being lost in the mind. That's what keeps those things going. So as soon as you interrupt that process with the present, it just dissolves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like the feeling that becomes familiar, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it now, is you catch something like that, and it just melts away, and it's replaced with bliss, like a little bit of bliss. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's nothing. I was reacting to nothing. Like I'm holding on to, I'm contracting again. Like, what are you going to resist the world? You're going to stop the sun shining? Like, it's just that futile. That is all obvious. The problem before was when you're lost in the mind, you don't have a chance. There is no awareness. And so it goes on in the head and it tenses the body, and you're so disassociated, we don't even make that connection. You know what I mean? But like Eckhart's work speaks deeply to that area. But I came across Eckhart's work before, and you can sense the truth in it, but I couldn't interface with it. You know what I mean? I didn't know what was going on with it. It seemed true, but it was like, I'm not embodied. Like I can't even use this. But now Eckhart stuff has been key for me. I listen to the Power of Now, especially on repeat. It's just that it's a manual for life. You know what I mean? In terms of it's an actual handbook, and every time I turn that thing on, I often listen to it before I go to sleep and things like that. And I'll turn it on, and it'll be relevant to the moment before. 99% of the time, it's like I'm you know what I mean? I'm in somewhere where it's like and then he's like, oh yeah, and if this happens, and you're being a clown here, and it's like, I was just doing that. Funny you mentioned that. And so those spiritual teachings become accessible when you can be embodied. Before you're embodied, they're just ideas. They're things for the head. You know what I mean? And it's just like, cool, this is cool stuff for me to feed my intellect. I'm going to go on suffering with some cool new ideas. You know what I mean? I can talk about it till the cows come home, but until you have enough space in the body where you can get down there into the actual experience of the moment through the body, which is the only place you can ever interface with it, that changes the game.
Definitely. I listened to, when I was in the kind of bedbound stage of mine, I listened to The Power of Now and A New Earth probably 30 times on repeat. I came across it and I listened to it and I was like, oh my gosh, and then I just listened again and again and again. And it was really helpful for me especially in that period, because one of the things that was causing me a lot of additional suffering in that situation was the stories that were stretching me into the past and stretching me into the future of like, well, how long is this going to go on for? I don't think I can manage if this like carries on for another year. And it's been going so long, it's so difficult. All those stories were adding so much suffering to the reality of, yes, I'm in pain right now and I'm dealing with it. Like that's not suffering. That's just experience. Suffering is all the stories that are built around it. So that it was really, really helpful for me. I'll just say one thing on the dissolving thing when you mentioned about bringing awareness to it and it dissolving. I think for me personally, that is 100% true around thought forms, and like maybe if there's some like pattern or story that starts coming in of like, oh, this person's, you know, like whatever it is, or something that relates to me. I think when there's a emotional response with it, I think at least how it works for me is to allow that to dissolve. I usually have to express that if that's like getting in my car and screaming if I felt some anger, or like allowing the tears to flow if there was some sadness about something. I think the emotional component expresses like in time, kind of. The mental story component can dissolve instantly with that kind of awareness. Yeah.
No, I know what you're saying there. And it's almost like the strength of the contraction. You know what I mean? Whereas it's like if it's a really strong contraction and there was already a strong emotion, either it happened quickly or it had been bubbling for a while, you need to do different processes. And things like you're saying in the modern world, we can't just let things out as they are. You know what I mean? So you do have to go to an appropriate container. You know what I mean? You don't want to get fired from your job or whatever it is because you're being a lunatic. And then that's the modern world, for better or worse. You know what I mean? We have to fit into those things. But I think that's a really great addition there. And I think you're 100% right. If it's a strong contraction or it's been rolling for a while, to generate emotion, you know what I mean? Because the emotion just comes from it cooking a bit longer in the body, or it's a really strong old pattern or trigger point or whatever. Something big has transgressed you immediately and it's caused a violent reaction. That is it can be a more involved process, and obviously we all develop our own channels and ways of releasing that, but the fact that you're embodied means that you know it needs to be released, because classically that's what becomes the 1354th layer on your shoulder or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Is that emotion that you needed to release, you weren't even mindful of it happening, and then you don't release it and the whole process just stays unconscious, and that's another bit of another couple of millimeters on your 10th shoulders or whatever.
Yeah, and you're sitting in non-judgment of the emotional response in your system as well. It's just like, oh right, this has arisen. I'm gonna let this out. Because I know for me, especially when I was younger, I was carrying a lot of unexpressed anger, and it would like erupt in like ridiculous things. Like one time I like smashed in my own car door, booted in my own car door because something happened. It's just it's a thing to do. But like
it seems funny when you think of it, but when you get caught in that stuff, it's visceral. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like I would in the past, like I had like strong judgments against like I would, you know, be angry at myself for getting angry. You know, like and then gets into these
contraction cascade. Yeah. That's how it works. Yeah, that's what most of it is.
Yeah, and just building upon itself. So allowing, just being non-judgment of the self of like, all right, that something came up, and you're in the flow. You're like you're dancing with Shakti. You're like in the flow of life and nature. You're not resisting any of it. And you're consciously aware enough, say it is anger in that example, not to just like chuck it at somebody else or the next person that comes along, or your kid if you've got kids or whatever it is. You know, you're holding that and dealing with it and releasing it. I mean, occasionally anger, occasionally that might be the right response in the moment to certain transgressions, when you've got to defend yourself or whatever. But
there's an appropriate expression for all of that sort of stuff. But it's you go.
I was just going to say, like, I remember I think I actually put a little snippet of this talk on my YouTube channel years ago from a Ram Dass talk, and he's talking about the space it gives you between the reaction. So he says, like, somebody's like come up to him after a show and being like, oh, you really sucked last night, you were terrible. And he's like, ego in me is like going, well, there are all these reasons, but there's this like stillness, this peace. He talks about like the mantra, like the Ram, but having that space, that doesn't mean he says like, I might have hit the guy, but it was still conscious. There was space between it.
Yeah, and there's a sweet line there to walk where some of Eckhart's cues there I find really valuable in terms of a lot of the time when the ego gets triggered, Eckhart sort of says celebrate it and go into it because it's based around a fictional identity. It's not important, you know what I mean? But there is certain boundaries for us as men or women or whatever, where there is times where you do need to stand for something and resist certain things in a conscious way, and that's the sweet spot, you know what I mean? But if you do that from an embodied place, again, the embodiment is really the key because you're never going to go too far out of line if you're there. Because as you're doing it, that normally that really burst comes from the head, the unregulated, unconscious. From here, it's deep and it's controlled. You know what I mean? It's a controlled explosion. When aggression's needed, it's there in a more controlled and respectful way. Whereas those explosions often come from the mind and the contraction and without considering first. You know what I mean? That really impulse sort of
Yeah, they're usually unjustified, like those impulsive ones normally. Like
yeah. If you're going to react strongly, you want to have at least considered it first. You know what I mean? And sat with it and seen how it felt, and then being like, why does it feel like that? And you know what I mean? And as long as you're not in danger or whatever, you know what I mean? There's time to process that sort of stuff. You know, it's very rarely that you need to act in a millisecond to protect yourself. And when you do, it's guided by those nerves that we're reefing out of fascia, and it's less than it's quick, lightning. And so if it's not lightning, there's always time to consider it and be present. Interesting thing that I noted from seeing people who went about, because there's this bit that really interests me is like, why, obviously sensitive people and yada, 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 and there's a whole list, but why do some people awaken in the body and other people go for the mind for years and years and years, Vipassana retreats and all of these things, and then eventually those people wake up in the body all at once. Like I'll give you an account of Frank Yang. I don't know if you've come across him on YouTube, but he's an interesting character, sort of a non-dual. He had Vipassana, 10 years of a sort of 5 to 10 year Vipassana path and all mind. And then about 7-8 years in, he had all of the chakras open up in a week, bedridden for a couple of weeks. And then boom, all of the body stuff just happened. Like he was so concentrated and had spent so much time refining the mind that the body exploded. You know what I mean? But this path that we're discussing is coming through the body as the path. You know what I mean? An embodied awakening is more of the process. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting that no matter which way you hit that from, I think all roads lead to Rome in a sense. Do you know what I mean? But it's almost like you always have to the body always has to be cleared. Like those energy and that blockages have to be cleared from the body. If you have an 8 years of, I think he was like 3 hours a day concentration practice, you can probably laser dissolve those things in the body. You know what I mean? Because you're so present and there's so much spaciousness in that system where it can happen like that. But this embodied path is a beautiful path, but it's a rare path. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure if you've appreciated, but I scoured the internet when this process happened to me. You're probably one of people I could count on one hand who have had what we're talking about actually happen. Lots of people will talk about Kundalini and all this stuff. They're not talking about that. You know what I mean? They screamed into their pillow or something and had some sort of an emotional release or a catharsis. That's their Kundalini awakening. You know what I mean? Like it happened May 19th and some of the 20th. And then, you know what I mean? It's not the same thing. This really deep asanas, sacred bodily awakening, energetic, healing the stuff through the body first and wringing it out, God wringing you out, like that whole process is really rare. You know what I mean? And so it's just interesting that it's another path. And I've struggled a bit in terms of, and I'd be curious to see where you landed in terms of how you relate to spiritual practices now, like concentration practices and things like this, because those people often have, Dzogchen, do nothing, Zen. That is sort of this path. It's a surrender path. You know what I mean? It's not a really heady, concentrated path. And I really struggle now to even do any concentration practice because I'll just get sucked into this. And it's pretty hard to say no to this. So where have you landed there in terms of how you see that side of things? You know what I mean? Do you still have a spiritual practice there, or do you just see this path as is your life the practice now? Or
there's Yes, I do see my life as the practice. Absolutely. especially because I'm in a fit, because I had like this massive hermit phase for over a decade, and now I'm
Yeah.
very much like pulled into the physical, like with all the things that I do. I do see my life as practice. When in terms of the stillness kind of meditation, for me, when I'm meditate these days, it's more about just like sitting with the Kundalini and flooding the body with that light. Essentially, it's just sitting in this blissful, and stillness is the result of that. A lot of the time, I don't do like very long meditation practices though, because if I do, I still find that then okay, well, it's opening a door where I've got to start like moving into some bigger career process because I'm getting
Yeah.
into that step of relaxation, or sometimes it gets a little bit too strong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, my practice is like flooding the body with light, and just and as soon as I sit there, it's very very blissful for me now. How the Kundalini feels in the system, it's
Yeah.
like just tingling and like light and beautiful. So just
I
sitting
can
and bathing,
feel it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So you're just sitting in the field there, and
just
I
bathing
can
in that.
see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just for a little, not even for that long, like 10 minutes, sometimes in the morning. And then I guess my other spiritual practices, I do like guided meditations quite often before bedtime, clearing
Yeah.
things. Sometimes still do cord cuttings because things build up in day-to-day life. When I was completely a hermit, like I just sort of mentioned, like it was all me, all process my thing, but interacting with, many, many people, even though I've got like techniques for like energetic protection, holding my own field, things
Yeah.
build up. And so I do like, I do practices to just kind of clean the system still.
Yeah.
And present moment practice is still, like we've been talking about the Eckhart Tolle thing, as much as
Yeah.
possible, attempted to be present in every action. So those kind of things. I think on the other point around Kundalini Awakenings, I think, I don't want to sound, I sound too harsh, but I feel like, people, I think people are very confused about, or maybe what the levels of Kundalini Awakening are, or what a Kundalini Awakening is.
There's a
And I
poverty
think,
of language there, isn't there? Like it's
yeah,
like drugs. Are you talking about mushrooms or are you talking about black tar heroin? You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's the same
exactly.
name. Yeah.
There definitely is, because I think some people talk about having a Kundalini awakening when it was maybe just like they just felt some prana in a meditation, and like they
Yeah.
had a little blissful sort of experience. And then you get into the distinction between top down awakenings and bottom up awakenings, where I think like the top down awakening, where it kind of like descends down, which is what I think happened to me initially. That really seems to work on the level of awareness and consciousness. Like you can have this rapid shift into that. I would suggest that perhaps, I don't know for sure because he doesn't really go into it in too much depth, but maybe Eckhart Tolle had like a kind of top down awakening, because it's that rapid shift in consciousness. But there comes a point, and this speaks into what you were saying as well, when on your soul's journey, or like spirit's like, right, we need to like descend into the body and get all this other stuff out, because the mind is just one layer of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's the case, and it's an interesting thing. In the top down, bottom up, like psychedelics in general. What's your perception of them now? Because like I had early, really profound psychedelic experiences, but I woke up probably 5 years from my last one. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
or something like that. But I feel like it was related. And when I was talking to Mickey Owen, he had a video posted on YouTube. Again, he's in one of the handful, and he was like, what's this happening after ayahuasca? And it was really ripping Kundalini energy. And I got in contact with him, and he talked about his ayahuasca ceremony experience, very similar to what you accounted, by the way, with the portal and the entities. And I've had similar experiences as well. And that, when he was saying that, I was like, oh, I had that. And then, but he woke up straight after. You know what I mean? Like the day after, or that it continued on from the ceremony, and then so then that made me realize like, oh, was that related? You know what I mean? Like my ayahuasca was like 10 years prior to, but I wouldn't have been ready for the if that had happened then. Like that's that time I'm recounting to you of like not being able to sit 40 minutes in the dark, and you know what I mean. Like I was really couldn't meditate for 5 minutes. You know what I mean, without sort of having a panic attack. I wasn't ready. I was a really sort of scrambled young man at the time. So you know, maybe that timeline. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you think there with psychedelics and how it all interfaces? And also, I'd be curious now because I still use psychedelics like. I periodically will take a bit of mushrooms, you know, between 0.5 grams and 1 gram. Oh, that just unlocks it calibrates my surrender. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you thought you were surrendering? Look at, you know, have a go at this. And I'll just melt into the thing and it'll do stuff on my body, which is probably the one area, you know what I mean? It really supercharges that Kundalini energy. And then it's like, gets into a weird thing where you can have a psychedelic experience, but it won't give you a permanent non-dual awakening. I think that's pretty sort of clear. It's not going to do all of that work for you. But if it supercharges the work on the body, then that gets into an interesting thing. So lob all of that over to you just in terms of what you make of that.
Yeah. So I think psychedelics, in terms of the plants like mushrooms and ayahuasca,
Yeah.
I think they can be powerful initiators for sure. And like you said, I think the reason I mentioned that mushroom experience at the beginning of this conversation is because I feel it was like an initiator and it primed me in a certain way. It was an opening that I needed for this step to happen later on. And that's, to me, is just the same as like somebody sitting with a guru or like, you know, whatever path your life and journey to awakening is meant to go down is what it's meant to go down. And for me, the mushroom was definitely a part of opening that doorway to allow the Kundalini awakening further down the line. I think they are extremely beneficial and powerful and beautiful medicines when treated in a sacred way and approached with reverence and care. They're very strong. They're very powerful. They can, you know, you've got to, especially if you're going for like those high doses, if you're going to have like a high dose mushrooms or lots of a big powerful ayahuasca ceremony, you got to be prepared that it's going to be a powerful experience. And I didn't, so after, once Kundalini awoke, I didn't have any psychedelics for over a decade. For me, it just felt like the idea of taking a psychedelic, considering how intense the process was, just seemed utterly insane. It would be like throwing like gasoline on like you know, like on a fire that was completely out of control, and me just there like chucking loads of petrol on it or whatever. So it just seemed insane. So I didn't, and then I think it was about 4 years ago, I was going through like some relationship things, and I decided, I got the call to like go back to the mushrooms. And I had, like you say, it was just like 1 gram, but now that is so strong for me. It's the equivalent of like, say, having like
stronger than 5 grams.
It's close. It's in the ballpark. And I think like what I noticed as well was, it's my whole system is so compatible now with the kind of frequency that the mushroom's bringing in. It's just like a continuation. It's just a continuation of something that's already like alive and weaving in me. But I definitely agree with what you're saying. The first time I had them in recent times, I did a whole ceremony for it. I went out into nature. I had a fire. I was praying, calling the directions, doing a whole sacred container for it. And when I went into the tent to lay down, I laid down, and it was just like I could hear like this voice just going, "Relax." And I was like, "Oh, I am relaxed." And it's like, "Relax more." And it just kept saying it. And I just like, "Relax more." And I just felt like these layers of tension just moving off me. And then every single thought that came up in my mind for that whole experience, this same voice was just like, "Let it go. let it go. And I was witnessing these thoughts just burning in this like fire that I could see in my inner eye. And this hilarious line came through at one point, because it was to do with, like I said, it was to do with like this relationship and some other stuff around relationships. But this story started coming up, and this voice just said to me, "Oh, look, another one of James's stories of suffering. Let it go." And it was just hilarious. And I was like laughing and crying at the same time, and just surrendering this to fire. So I definitely, even though I'm in, like I've been, in this huge Kundalini process and it's been super intense, they still have lessons for me, and have helped me with like little bits of like, yeah, just helping me go a bit further. They are, allies and helpers to me, even now. So I don't use them that often, but I've had, in the last 5 years, I've had maybe like, I think 4 mushroom experiences and probably about 5 ayahuasca journeys. And ayahuasca I found that very interesting, because I've obviously I've never taken ayahuasca without an awoken Kundalini, so I've no idea what it's like without that. But for me, it's very much lubrication for the process that's already going on.
Big time. Yeah. It somehow, and it's difficult. It's difficult to articulate here. I think we discuss with the left hemisphere, but we have all of these experiences, including this Kundalini stuff, with the right hemisphere. So you've got to sort of translate it over to the guy riding on top, the ego that takes all the credit for everything. You know what I mean? And thinks he's the king of the show, but these experiences are imagistic, they're deep, they're sacred, and they happen outside of language. And so to port them over to language, there's an incredible poverty there, as you know better than anyone. Terence spoke on that eloquently as is possible to do so. But it's really, they're somehow one and the same. And I think like some of the stuff you talk about with the entities and all of that gets to some of it. You know what I mean? It's either that these medicines get you in touch with the deepest part of you, and those are the places and spaces where you can interact with these other entities and whatever. But however you want to frame it, the experiential reality of it is totally unavoidable. That if you have this process going on and you take some psychedelics, it's just a volume knob. It's just more presence, and as you dial up that presence, the surrender happens easier. Everything, and what you're saying about the frequency thing, like I've had visions repeatedly of the light is a rainbow. You refract with the light with a prism, and you see the rainbow. All of this here is running on this rainbow energy. The Kundalini is that. The sexual energy is that. The psychedelic energy is that, and it's all really miraculous when you look at it. When you really look at it, and it's like this stuff radiating out of this star, that's the energy that we're all dancing with. That's the Kundalini, that's the life energy, that's consciousness, it's all interwoven in a really profound way. And the frequency, the vessel is the constricting factor. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, I really resonate with that of, I would have early mushroom experiences, and you have this profound head awakening, but it's twisted. Like and it wants something from the body that the body can't do. And a lot of my disassociation and I've had derealization, depersonalization things from psychedelics where they really knock you around, and that it's that caveat there. You got to be really careful with these things. Psychedelics can destabilize you as easy as anything. Probably the best. They're a real heavy hitter in that way, because they twist your reality. You know what I mean? They can show you the Godhead, and then you go back to contracted you tomorrow. You know what I mean? And then you're in the supermarket, and you know what I mean? Like it's a very intense thing. And that frequency, they wanted something from my body that was uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like I would take a dose of psychedelics, even lower doses back in the day, and it would be like, there's something in here. There's a real call, but I don't have the tools. You know what I mean? So it was just like a signal that would build, and then it'd be like, oh, okay, focus on something else. Oh, what's going on? And it was like a delirium almost, where I've had 5 grams, 2 years into the Kundalini, and it was 1 gram, 5 grams is the same. The 5 grams comes with the easier surrender, but there was just a deeper step into the non-duality of my nervous system could handle it. I could actually see it. Like I could see the toroidal nature of everything just arising and vanishing in an instant and flowing up and out. And like it was clear, you know what I mean? There was no distortion, and it was because my nervous system could hold more of it. Not all of it, you know what I mean? But enough of it where I could actually piece it together, and I felt that there wasn't such a dissonance there. And 5 grams are a really... I had the, I'd probably say, displeasure of doing smoked DMT in that sort of same time frame. A situation arose where it came up, and that was a bit of a mistake. I got the strong signal. Those entities were in there, and they were like, "This is not your path to do this." You know what I mean? The mushrooms are a different thing, and but the DMT smoked was just cutting straight to the center of it all, and it was my head spun on the thing, and then I bowed, like I was in the presence of the sacred, but it was too much for my nervous system. That was too much for my nervous system to handle, and I got the strong signal that you are very, like, we're allowing you not to be destroyed by gazing on this, but the strong signal was, don't come back through this door, like this isn't your path. And being in there with the nervous system where it is at the moment, you know, I'm only 2 years into this process, was a real strong, like, I glimpsed the sacred, you know, sort of through the open door there, and there was a strong Hindu element. It was Shakti or Shiva or whatever, and just glistening with radiance, and this deep full body bow came out of me, you know what I mean, that I've never done before or since. So it just, boom, my head spun on an axis, that bow came out of me, and I was just repeating nothing to the friends around me, but that was too pure. Like that was too pure, like it was, and it was totally destabilizing. I didn't sleep that night because I'd been through the ringer, and I have this embodied thing now. Only lasted a day or two, you know, previously that could have been 6 months of being knocked around for me, but it was still traumatic, and it was definitely a signal of, no, that door, if your nervous system's ready, you don't need to walk through that door. But everything up until that point is, don't walk through that door. So the thing was just don't go there. But I get a strong signal from the psilocybin where this is a powerful tool. This is beautiful. You can work with this. You can dial up the dosage and you can play with it. And even up to 5 grams didn't destabilize me. It allowed me to pass through those states and see more and see where my nervous system was at and what it could hold. But is that sort of, does that sort of resonate there?
Yeah. That's really interesting about the DMT as well. There's occasionally been the thought pop up in my mind of like, oh, that'd be quite interesting, but I've not felt like any real sort of pull.
And that goes away, doesn't it? Like I got the strong message during the 5 gram trip of, I don't need this. Like, this is interesting, and it's interesting to see where my nervous system, but when you are younger and you need it, you feel the call. And there was just this clear realization to me that directly in proportion to how much you feel the call, it means you should do it. But when you don't feel the call, don't do it. You know what I mean? That it's really simple. So if people are drawn, like, you know, they just suck you in when you're younger. It's like you don't even know what you're in for, but you want it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, and I think, like, just in terms of what you're speaking into as well, like, especially if somebody's going through a Kundalini Awakening, I would advise extreme caution around taking psychedelics if you're going through a Kundalini Awakening, especially early on. If it's like a really intense physical process for you.
For sure.
But if you are really feeling that calling, then there's probably some medicine in it for you. But yeah, my experience was definitely to be like, there's no way I can take one of those. But obviously everybody's experience is kind of different and stuff. But yeah, you've got to be really sure. It's got to feel like really, really aligned.
And I would agree. I think in general, advising people who are going through the Kundalini process to stay away until until such a time that you know in your heart of hearts that, and then only be very careful and go very slow and all of those things. But yeah, it is one of those things where it is related in some way, but it can be a real potentiator, like a really turn the volume up, and that can be. Oftentimes, people are just looking for how to turn the volume down on these things. You know, exactly. I wasn't, but you often hear that's a thing, and there's a lot of fear, and the intensity is nothing to play with. So yeah, definitely, I think that's sound advice.
Yeah, and we haven't really touched on it so much in this conversation, but the Kundalini experience, obviously there's all this physical stuff going on, the physical purge and the emotional things, but it can be very psychedelic in the visionary state as well. We've sort of mentioned like a few visionary experiences, and I mentioned one with the crown opening, but I've had all sorts of things all sorts of experiences during the Kundalini Awakening, especially early on, but up to this day, really, that you would only expect to encounter on a psychedelic experience otherwise, or I would. And it's kind of just become commonplace for me now. But
it's the same space in a way. Like when you get in there and the energy's moving, it's a very familiar. It's almost the same space.
Which I've wondered sometimes, like. Well, is that I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes, to be honest. But is that like that Kundalini energy will just be like awoken in the mushrooms in their own kind of way, for example, and probably in the ayahuasca vine and other stuff. Like I'm sure that this energy is just like strongly flowing through there. What they called? I keep wanting to say myofascia.
Mycelium.
Mycelium, the mycelium networks and things.
It's almost like that's how it exerts its effects. Like it seems like that, James. You know what I mean? It's almost like the how you have the trip is you get flooded with this energy to some degree. You know what I mean? Yeah. And whether how much your vessel can handle or whatever, or because I've had experiences, like friends of mine who have had ayahuasca experiences, and they've moved like I move just during the trip. And then it stops. You know what I mean? And
for sure, you see that in I hold shamanic breathwork ceremonies as well, holotropic breathwork, and you see that in the breathwork as well. So that type of breathing, I think, also taps into this field, which is one of the reasons I got interested in and started holding those spaces, was because when I started attending those breathwork ceremonies, I was like, wow, this is helping people heal in the same way that Kundalini helped me. People will spontaneously move. They'll have these big emotional releases, sounds, toning, which
is
sounds
that common?
It's very, very common.
Oh, okay, wow.
The moving is, I would say, like say you've got a group of 20, there's going to be at least probably 2 or 3 people that are going to have some like spontaneous movements involved,
and they look
like,
familiar to you. You can see,
I can see the patterns, like for sure. So I think I've heard this metaphor being used around Kundalini awakenings before, like if you think about like wood and a fire, like if your soul is like very, very dry wood, essentially ready for that Kundalini awakening, it only takes a little spark for that whole thing to be in blaze. But if it's like a sodden log, you've got to keep going. So I think that can be like the difference between like somebody taking mushrooms, for example. Like if their log is very, very wet, it's not going to activate a Kundalini awakening, no matter how many you throw at them. But if it's like dry and ripe and ready for this process, then it can be a trigger for that to happen further down the line.
Yeah, and the further down the line thing is interesting, because I think that's almost key. It's like you're if you aren't ready, then some key is unlocked. And then when you are ready, but it seems related. You know what I mean? Even distally, time is probably an illusion. You know what I mean? So we're thinking cheerfully that this is 10 years later, when sometimes you have these, with these deep experiences, when you get into these deep places, it all seems like it just happened. You know what I mean? Like all of these events maybe not be as maybe aren't as separate as we think, but there does seem to be an unlocking of a potentiality. And then when the conditions are right, it's like a seed gets planted, and then when the soil reaches the right humidity and everything, then it germinates. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is something that, because there's always that element of the entities and work being done. You know what I mean? That's really common. Like I've had people that know nothing about any of this. They don't know who Terence McKenna is, whatever, any of this stuff. And they'll be like, seems like it was like a conveyor belt, like it was like a lab, like like things were being done precise. Like it's almost always that, like an operation or things. And oftentimes the mantises, I've had lots of that. And like there's really interesting archetypes that do seem like something gets done, and then we did it, now it's all good. Yeah, you can enjoy the little try before you buy enlightenment thing, but it happens real quick early on, and then it's like, you know what I mean? And I think that is, we really just don't have any idea in that space what's happening there, whether that's a imaginal space, or these are archetypes, or this is a deep sacred interdimension. You don't really know, you know what I mean? But when it has the cash value of these sorts of awakening experiences, it's hard to argue that it's at least not really significant at the minimum. You know what I mean? Yeah, for sure. There's something there, but it's hard to get at. In relation to the rewilding component, I found that really interesting. I came across your video of sleeping on the floor and some of the stuff about diet and stuff like that. That happened to me. Like, I saw your video of sleeping on the floor after waking up that day on the floor. You know what I mean? And I had I had to sit with this experience of like, so it must rewild. If it's happening to him and it's happening to me, and there's no connection, you know what I mean? Then it's like it rewilds you in terms of back to like the blueprint you're talking about of the body. It's got this, it knows what the body is like when it's totally aligned. It also knows how it wants to live. And that's as naturally as possible from my estimation. Like whole foods, a real strong call to like, this isn't food. And it's pretty close, but it's like, that's not food. We want just food. You know what I mean? And we want just water and as clean as possible. And we want to be able to have our body sleep in a natural sort of environment. And we want to see nature and we want to be in our natural environment. There's a real strong call there. What do you make of that side of it? Like, it is like a rewilding, or like...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. There's an element of like sadness in me that I can't be more that, you know, like, because I do have to, I mean, I guess, you know, it falls back on I think the line from the Bible, like, to be in the world, but not of it. And the shaman has like one foot in both worlds. So I think we kind of balance, there's a balance in that I'm surrendering into, but there's definitely a part of me that would love to be like way more wild.
Right on the edge of the village, dancing in the moonlight, sort of thing. And
I kind of was that for quite a long time. I think because it ties into what we were saying earlier about the embodiment. You're reconnecting back into the body, which is you're out of all the all the thought streams and stuff, and the body is primal. It's so embedded in nature, and it is nature. It is wild, and it knows. I think, like you just said, it knows what's right for it. And when you've quietened the stories and the programs, because we are programmed in this culture from a very young age, very intensely, for nefarious purposes in a lot of ways, I think. And when they start falling away, it's like the kind of curtains have been removed, and you're seeing and feeling more clearly, and the body's just like, what when you were stuck up here, like without any communication going on in the body, and you're sleeping on a mattress where your spine's like that all night, and it like it's bearable because you're not in your body. But when you're in your body, like, it starts to realize, well, this is not right. Like this doesn't feel good.
What the
and
going on here?
It's just kind of like the communication's like coming online more. And I personally think two of the most unacknowledged things that are detrimental to human health right now is the beds we sleep on and the footwear that we wear, because we spend so much time asleep. And like when you're in when you've got those mattresses where can't really display it, but people are on a pillow with their head up, and then the neck spine's curved, and then it dips in the middle because the mattress is soft, and there's kind of where your hips are.
Yep.
The whole posture, the whole spine is out of alignment for like most of the night. And what's especially prevalent with Kundalini Awakens is the body's going to be wanting to do a lot of adjustments in those nights during the night, and the hard surface is allowing points for the body to press off and hold, and your spine, your skeletal system is being supported, which actually allows the muscles to relax. I think it's a false sense of relaxation when you're in your bed sometimes, because it's putting strain on certain areas that you don't realize.
Yeah.
And then in terms of footwear, I mean, I go properly barefoot as much as I can. I just climbed a mountain barefoot in Scotland actually recently, which was really beautiful experience, because when I was bedbound, I used to dream of like climbing mountains, and so I was in Scotland like climbing this mountain barefoot, and yeah, I had a really big emotional release actually. But that's a bit of a side tangent. When you've got the shoes on, if you're wearing any normal shoes, even if you've got like just a small amount of heel, that's raising your heels up. So then your hips have to realign to make, to adjust for that heel being
like that. Yeah, that's what I wear. Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's the exact same concept. Yeah.
I wear them. And so then your hips out of alignment, and then your spine's having to readjust for that, and then your head's having to readjust, and the whole system is out of its natural alignment just from like potentially like a 1-inch heel. And
same concept as the bed, that artificial comfort of the cushion of the thing. I noticed that when I would wear those shoes, my hips would hurt. Like up the kinetic chain, I'd get like hip pain from walking, and then when you ground out, it just goes away. You know what I mean? It just totally goes away. And if you go back and try and sleep on a soft mattress now, you feel tensed up. You know what I mean? Like when you go, if you sleep on the right amount, and there's a math there that I've played with, you know what I mean, in terms of how firm you want to go, because artificially hard human surfaces aren't quite right. You want to sort of replicate compacted soil, like the tribal plateau, exactly. You know what I mean, where it's like there's a bit of give, and you might have had an animal skin or something, a little bit of compression there, so you're not right on the bone and things aren't going numb, but just enough to be off of that zone, and you're sweet. Yeah.
Definitely. And to just sort of follow on that a little bit of like why this is very detrimental for health, because the posture is really key in all health. This, especially when we're talking about like the flow of prana in the body and the energetic through the nadis and things, which nourishes the whole system. And when you're talking about blood flow, lymphatic drainage, all those other things, if you've got damaged posture, if your like shoulders are like hurt, that system is not working optimally, and the shoes and the bed are really big things. Like we're in a bed for say like half of the time, and then you've got shoes. So in total, like it's nearly most of the time that you've got something artificially distorting your natural posture. So I think that's really important, and I think the rewilding impulse as well, like like you sort of touched on, that goes to food. You just, after Kundalini Awakening, like I can push the boundaries a little bit with something that's maybe not too healthy like these days, but just like have a bit of a treat in inverted commas. But there's some things that are just like, it tastes like completely lifeless in the mouth. It's like you can just tell, and I can't even eat it. Whereas back in more unconscious times, I used to go to get burgers from McDonald's and things like that. I can't even imagine putting that anywhere near my near my body these days.
My body will dance like when the right food is in, it like, that happy food dance, you know what I mean, of like that sort of something in us, but the energy will respond to the right food. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it'll be like, this is nutritious, and it'll do, and I always know, because it sort of makes it feel difficult to swallow, because it'll do this sort of celebration of the thing, and it'll get to like acute angles there, and I'm like, I have to eat it though. You know what I mean? I know you like it, but we've got to actually consume it. So it's that sort of balance. But I think that's so crystal clear how you've explained that, James. Like, it seems so obvious now you mention it, but I didn't put two and two really together enough in my mind there, where it's like you're restored, you're embodied, like we've been talking about, so you can't tolerate that anymore. You know what I mean? Like I was acting in accordance with that, but I didn't have that concept totally smoothed in my mind. So that's really enlightening to it's so simple. You know what I mean? Is that when you're back in there, you can't tolerate the shit. And same thing I'm discovering now with, I do a fair bit of driving for work and stuff like that. It's just like that just wreaks havoc on my body. You know what I mean? But when you're unconscious, it's like, oh, whatever, 6 hours here, or maybe might stop and rest my legs or whatever. I can feel that lack of blood flow. It feels like being hit by a truck. You know what I mean? And so I really am trying to prioritize work and everything that leaves me feeling more natural, because it's so obvious now. Now I'm embodied. It's like if I do a 2-hour stint, even if I walk for 15 minutes, that has a toll on the rest of my day and on my body generally, where it's like it's not good to be cramped up in a little metal box like that for 2 hours. And it's things like that you become so much more sensitive to. And yeah, food is on that same dimension. And those other crutches, it's always got to do with adding some artificial comfort, thinking that we're making things better when really we're messing up a system that we don't even understand. We're discalibrating and throwing out of equilibrium a delicately poised system, which is very it's not what we want to be doing. We want to be in harmony as much as possible in the modern world, which isn't 100%, but it's you can get pretty close.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The shamanic archetype is like, there's something there, obviously, Terence well, he used to talk a lot about that. The shaman is a sick person who has cured himself, Terence would often say. And there's that, I've seen you with the Alex Gray and the wounded healer and stuff like that. That is a really strong archetype there. And it just made me think, as of some of the stuff you were saying before, it's almost as if the shaman is the one who doesn't embody his culture as much, and you almost shed the culture from the body. Like, because what we're talking about here really is our natural state. But even humans classically, who were embedded in their culture, and it's time for you to get scarified or go get abandoned in the jungle or whatever it is, that would have been traumatic and bifurcated from the system a little bit. Much more natural, than sort of being raised on an iPad or something horrific of the modern times. But it's still, the culture is not your friend, Terence's classic line. And the shaman's job is almost to step out of culture and return to the natural state, because that's where he needs to be in order to execute his functions. You know what I mean? Like, your role as a shaman is to be totally in tune with the natural state and in tune with the environment. And then when they come to you, it was often pragmatic matters, as you know, from Terence's work, like, where have the game gone? Will it rain? Will the rain season come this year? And the shaman, totally emptied out, barefoot in the ground, just got done dancing in the moonlight last night and had some plant medicines, and he'll tell you whether it's going to rain, and he's going to know better than you because he's fully in tune with the environment. And so it's almost like a role, like a warrior has to go through these trials and tribulations to strain, and their role is to protect the village. That's a key role. The women nurture and bring up the young and are more sensitive to negative emotion, and they pay a toll for that. The shaman separates and sheds culture from his body and his mind in order to do his work. And it's alienating, and there's a price to pay, but it's also beautiful. Maybe that's the archetype here. You know what I mean? That the percentage of the populace that's drawn into awakening, and especially these types of experiences, maybe we are the shaman. You know what I mean? And maybe our role is somewhat murky and ill-defined in the modern context, but it seems like there's a real price, there's a price, and it seems like there's a utility function there. You're sort of getting pretty directly into it, you know what I mean? But not I haven't found that yet, you know what I mean? But you're almost stepping into the role of a healer. So what do you make of that side of things and that shamanic impulse?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a very big thread in my journey throughout. I mean, I did read early on that there can be Kundalini Awakenings, and there can be Kundalini Awakenings that are also shamanic initiations. I'm not saying that's, I don't know for sure on that, but mine certainly felt like there was a shamanic initiation element in it. And one of the key differences that I read about early on was like the full, I guess the full integration around death. That was like part of the key component, which certainly came up for me in a really big way.
Yeah. It's key to
So
the shamanic stuff, the death
yeah,
and the
yeah,
dismemberment, and yeah.
yeah, exactly. And being seeing death as like a friend, essentially, as a,
Yeah.
as opposed to like fearing it. And so yeah, it's been a big theme for me, the shamanic side of it. I've had continuous interaction with power animals right from the beginning, with that transformation that I had in the mushroom experience, but animal guides coming to me in dream spaces. Even like just recently, I just did, for the first time ever, I did like because I've done shamanic training as well in the sort of core shamanism, which is the often practiced in the West, which was like an amalgamation of different indigenous beliefs kind of created in the 60s, I think, by Michael Hanna. Anyway, I'm kind of like doing shamanic journeys in the dream space, going to the different worlds and stuff. So yeah, it's been a huge part for me. And I think what you're saying is true. There is a level of isolation with that. I feel there's a level of isolation with going through the Kundalini Awakening experience, because there's very few people that understand what you're talking about. And that was another initiation with Kundalini Awakening for me, of having to lose the need for people to understand me, and for people to, because for years early on, I've spoken about this in a video before, but I used to have such a strong, I was like, oh, if I could just touch this person and they could feel what's going on and somehow understand. And I had to shed the need to be understood and the need to be, I guess, yeah, just understood and seen in a certain way. And that's
Which is a
liberating
big
as well.
need. That's a big
It's a big
deal.
need.
You know what I mean? Like it's not that's not a small thing. It sounds small.
No,
The words sound small, but that's a huge alienating walking your own
definitely.
path there. There's a beauty in it, but there's a real solemn you're on your own. The flight of the
Yeah.
alone to the alone. It's and we're a social animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We're a
exactly.
social animal. Yeah.
We love social interaction. And so, yeah, I recognize the loneliness in some ways of this path. And I think that's like an aspect of the divine as well. Like, I don't feel lonely in the sense that like I've got beautiful relationships, friends, connection. I'm always interacting with people. I've got a community around me, support, massively supported by people. And then also there is like a little part of me that like went like through this very extreme journey in life that finds it difficult to relate that in some ways to other people. So there is a little bit of a loneliness in that. But the reason I'm saying I think it's like a divine loneliness is I think that's inherent in God as well. As much as God is like bliss and oneness, the one is also on its own. Like there's like all these, like there's
There's a non-dual, like a deep, profound truth to it. You are
yeah,
fundamentally alone. Those sacred
you are
experiences
alone.
reveal
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and
Because you're the only one here.
yeah. You're the only, yeah. I'm together because it's all playing out. Like
Yeah.
the Shiva, the one point of awareness, and then there's the Shakti, the flow, and it's kind of like that non-dual thing. I remember reading a really really good book called Tantra Illuminated by Christopher Wallace, and he talks about. It's a long time since I've read it, so I'm probably going to butcher like the names of these things. But there's I think they're called tattvas, and there's 30 maybe in this classic non-dual Shiva Tantra, and you go all up, and they're like higher and higher levels of understanding, and you get to Shakti, which represents like the universe in existence, like, and then you get to the Shiva, the point of awareness, and there's that non-dual kind of awareness. But I hope I'm describing this well enough. It's quite a difficult concept to describe properly. But then beyond that, which was Tattva Zero, which only the high initiates got initiated into, was the non-dual bringing in the dual as well. So like the non-dual includes the dual within it as well. And I think with a lot of these things, that's the kind of space I sit in, like this and this, instead of like we are the one and we're separate.
Yeah,
and with
you don't want to bypass and nullify the dance with total truth.
The dance. Yeah, exactly. They are both real in a sense. From my perspective, like that's I think
for sure. Yeah. No, I think it pays to respect that, and the tantric element is an interesting thing with obviously if this path wasn't alienating enough, the sexuality side of things, you know what I mean, often doesn't get talked about even when there is talk in this side of things. That part of it really took me by surprise, how it would work sexually, you know what I mean, and stir me up and direct the energy around, and that felt like the most natural thing in the world to it. But that was a really and I know you've had some videos where you talk sort of around these sorts of things and sexual shadow and stuff like that. I think that's important. Anything that can be said into the space. I think it was a convo you and Brent had where you got into it a bit, which I think was really good. It's the only place really that anyone talks about it. But that side of it is interesting because it does come to its own balance there in a similar way to the other stuff. You know what I mean? Is the rewilding. It's like the relationship to sexual energy is something that's really distorted in the modern world. You know what I mean? It's drugified and commodified, and it is the same energy. It's the same energy as all of this, and it's divine energy. You know what I mean? And it is creation. Like when you really logically think about it, it's like that's what we all are. You know what I mean? Like we grew from that divine union, and it's a beautiful and sacred thing that can happen. Like matter can be, you know, the two humans can turn matter using the bridge and the platform of sexuality, turn matter into conscious, like, you know what I mean, a conscious vessel, and it's this incredible, and that seems to be deeply all tied in here. You know what I mean? And I've had lots of very interesting experiences where if there's a tough blockage or whatever, it'll just be like, oh yeah, we'll just whip up some of this. You know what I mean? Like whip up some sexual energy and move it. And it's not about orgasm or pleasure at all. It seems almost this side of it is using that system. You know what I mean? I think that does play a role in sexual union and procreation and things like that. But this usage is, it does pursue climax on occasion. You know what I mean? But not for pleasure. Like it's business, not pleasure. Sort of a venture there, and it's really interesting. I'd just be curious to, after your time on the path, where you landed there. Did that sort of take you by surprise, that side of it, and was it apparent for you, or is that just a more of a unique thing to me, or what's your experience been there?
So are you meaning like?
The Kundalini, the energy will arouse me, manipulate the physical form, whatever, to generate energy, and then it will use it. Like as in, it'll build it up to a certain level where it's functional, and then it'll direct it to a certain spot, and then work with it and move it, and then it'll go back and build more and do that. And it like how it does with the rest of the process, but it does that, and then it also has, and that's probably the last topic that I'd like to get on after that, is in terms of working with other people and laying hands on other people. I know you do that sort of thing. I'm curious what your perception of that is. But that sexual side, in terms of a tantric, working with that sexual energy and actually consciously building it up, like the energy will totally do it. Like I'm not driving the bus, but that process is happening, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Did it surprise me? I think, to be honest, by the point that started coming up, there was nothing that could have done that would have surprised.
You were all shocked out. Yeah.
I was totally done with being surprised by the process, because mainly the sexual. Well, I don't know. That's maybe not totally true. There was definitely a period, and I did speak about this in that chat with Brent. There was like a period where a lot of sexual stuff was coming up, and I know exactly what you mean about like it bringing the sexual energy up, and sometimes it would like it's the Kriya's part of the Kriya would be me like pleasuring myself in that,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
the surrender into it. And I sometimes felt like early on like resistance to that, like, oh, is this, should I be doing this? Am I just like doing this for my own thing, or is it the Kriya? But
That's what I had. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Not knowing whether this was you co-opting it and wanting that, and it would get to a certain point where you would want the climax because it'd be like, well, you've fucking stirred me up now, but that wouldn't be a part of it a lot of the time. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It'd be like that. It was hard to tell. You know what I mean? There was
yeah,
boundaries because sexuality is so root and primal that it really can bring you into the brainstem, into the mind, and that exactly what you're saying there. That's the
yeah,
complexity
yeah.
of it.
Yeah, and so sometimes it would like move into ejaculation, sometimes not, and I can't quite remember if I distinctly felt like the times when it didn't, that sort of charge in other places to clear things like you're describing. I can't really recall that exactly. I think it felt like that was just all happening anyway, but maybe it was. It's just it's not something that's, this is quite that we're talking like probably, gosh, 9 years ago at this point, maybe,
Yeah.
like when all that really strong sexual stuff was coming up for me. Um, but what it did do was it was bringing up all sorts of desires, like anything you can think of. And this was like what I kind of referred to sexual as shadows. It was bringing up things that I'd repressed. Either I'd repressed or didn't sort of identify as being me, or had judgments against in some way. That could be like it could have been a mild judgment to extreme judgment, things that were like like immoral, like
Yeah.
just like every aspect of sexual expression
Yeah.
felt like it needed to come up in this period. And the way that I kind of moved through it was allowing those to rise, like holding them in non-judgmental awareness, allowing them to rise. If that meant like, if that was moving into pleasure, if that was moving into ejaculation or masturbation or anything, just letting it all flow through. And sometimes the orgasm, the release was a clearing, and sometimes it wouldn't take it there. So I found just allowing these parts to come up and be witnessed and held just a few times sometimes would move through, and that would be gone. And I think it was integrating, because I think the thing that's important to understand with the Kundalini Awakening is we're not just integrating our sexuality, we're integrating sexuality as a whole, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we're integrating sadness as a whole, and of like fear as a whole. There's non-personal aspects to it, which is a contradiction in terms, in a sense, because everything is personal because we are all connected and one. But
Yeah.
but we are also, we do have that separation as well. So yeah, I think it's important to not, especially if this is, say somebody's going through this, like you've got to just hold it in live awareness and not be like judging yourself about these thoughts, because it's just an aspect of that energy. And some of those forms you might be judged as distorted forms of sexuality, but it's all coming up to be integrated. And then once you've kind of gone through that, for me, it felt like my sexual energy had almost like that's come back into the body even more. Like it's not really like looking out so much like when you're a teenage boy, for example. It's not quite that same thing. Obviously I can appreciate beauty and have a relationship with my partner and all those things, and sexually active, but there's not this unconscious pull. There's not like this unconscious pull attached to the energy. I don't feel that I think there was beforehand. So I'd say that's like part of the process. And sexuality, as you touched on, is it's incredibly repressed in our culture. It reaches into well, I think I touched on this before as well, but I think this was like quite a profound revelation for me at one point. The words that we use when we're swearing, like curse words, and curse is, like it's an incantation, a magical act to cause harm on something. That's literally what a curse is. And most of those are words for our genitals or sexual actions. So there's this unconscious shaming of sexuality embedded in the language that we use. That's how deep it is. That's how deep this level of shame is. So even when you say, I mean, I won't use the words now on the podcast, but like if you're calling someone a whatever head, like there's a judgment in that the lingam, the penis, is bad because you're calling that person that as an insult. And the same with like words for sexuality, the same with words for the yoni. It's such a deep thing, and I also feel it reaches out into, it kind of infects like nudity as well, and goes into like body shame, where people feel like, nudity and sexuality are two separate things, and I think for some reason that's like really crossed over in our culture as well.
In that weird way, from a variety of factors, like you're saying. I think it's like young men sort of being co-opted to have this strong unconscious with the visual element, which is naturally more engrossing and engaging for men anyway, but it's like looped into this unconscious cascade with pornography and all these different things where it becomes a complex that isn't correct. You know what I mean? It's not the right expression, and that gets to that, that's part of, and there's lots of elements. It is a very complex topic, you know what I mean? But the fact that we clothe and cover up because we're afraid that we'll tear each other to pieces and go back animal. But you see cultures where they don't do that and they all seem fine, you know what I mean? And so it's a weird sort of, Yeah,
it shows that it's just a cultural program. Even in, like, you go to Germany, for example, at our space, our wellness center, you're allowed to be naked in the sauna because that's essentially how saunas were originally intended to be. It's a choice. Obviously, people can cover up if they want. But there's been quite a bit of pushback on that at times towards me. And I feel like there's some healing in being comfortable in your own body in that way. There's some healing. So I don't want to necessarily like block people who are comfortable in that way because of the cultural programming around that. Like if you only need to go to Germany, for example, which is hardly anywhere away from here, and the idea of wearing clothes in a sauna would be absurd to an entire culture of people very, very similar to us. So it's definitely like, it's something that's, it's something that I think needs to be healed, and I think it ties into the healing of sexuality collectively.
Yeah, no, I think that's valuable, and it's such a complex topic that it's probably one of the most multifaceted topics that there is. So it's a tricky one to navigate. But even just hearing that there, it sounds like you had sort of similar sort of periods to myself, and they were sort of transient periods, which I already almost feel like it was a really intense period of that. And then it changed the relationship, similar to the sleep and the shoes, and that where sexual energy is much, you've sort of untangled those unconscious cascades, and it's much more of a natural embodied process where you get more in tune with it being like, this is for procreation. You know what I mean? Like, it's sacred and you can have a good time with it and things like that. But it's not, it's a lot closer to a sort of a sacred tool for procreation than it is, something that you exploit like a fast food, or, you know what I mean? It's a deeply embodied sacred thing that is shared between individuals, and you can have a relationship with yourself in that way. But yeah, it's an interesting area, and it's good to hear your thoughts on that and that sentiment. The last thing, you can touch on that as well if you want to address any of that. But the last thing that I'd like to hear is, how's your experience been with, like, can this energy be transmitted to another person? Like, or what do you feel like when you lay hands on someone else? And is that something that you do a lot of, or is it more of the breathwork stuff and things like this? And have you had any interesting experiences on that vein? Because it just seems to be something where I feel like something can happen there. Like, I almost feel like when I touch someone else, the distance between the 2 points that I touch, it almost feels like it creates an electrical circuit where they become, the points between my hands become like an extension of my body in a way, you know what I mean? And so as energy flows through me, it can flow through between those points like bioelectrically. I don't know, that sounds insane, but that's what it feels like. You know what I mean? To my logical mind, as I'm saying it, I'm booking myself in for the psych ward. You know what I mean? But it's that sort of a,
Do you mean,
a feeling.
are you saying when you touch into either
So
hand, do you
if I touch someone on 2 points, and because
yeah.
I'll let the process go onto someone else, and when someone else is there, it'll happily go to someone else, and it'll take the focus totally off me, and the Kriyas will just move on to them, and I'll touch, say 2 points on their spine, and it feels like between those 2 points, the energy flows through me into them and into my other hand. Do you know what I mean? And it almost feels, I haven't been able to wake the energy up in anyone. I'm not sure if that's a responsible thing to do anyway, but I just have had experience with both hands on and then also, sexually and things like that, feeling like that creates a bioelectrical circuit as well. And it's almost like the other person becomes an extension of your being. So I'd just be curious what your thoughts were there, what your experiences have been, and what you sort of make of that side of it. It's a bit of another bit of a tangled mess, that whole thing, but it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do quite a lot of hands-on work because I hold breathwork ceremonies, which involves that. So I hold the group breathworks every month, and that involves quite a lot of hands-on energy and hands-on healing. I do one-to-one sessions as well that involves that. So there's a few points, I think. I definitely agree with what you're saying. I feel that as well. When it's two places, I can feel like this energetic link up. And I've also felt that in my own system during the Kriyas. There was many times when like Kundalini would like put my head one place and like another place, and I could feel the connection. And I can kind of feel that through somebody else when I'm doing it. When I'm doing any hands-on healing, the energy like really charges in the system. Like my hairs stand on the end. I can feel it like strongly coming out of the hands.
Mine goes crazy. Like my breathing will enter in spontaneous breathing patterns. A lot of like it'll go and it does those during different processes anyway. But it'll really always reliably it gets it really aggravated. It seems like, you know what I mean. It draws almost like psychedelics trying to work with someone else. It gets it charged.
Yeah, definitely. It absolutely charges it up. And I find like for me, I'm getting out of the way in terms of the mind. It's just the same way that the Kriyas worked and do work healing my body, in the same way it moved my body. I'm kind of entering into kind of like a trance state, but where my hands just know where to go.
Yeah.
And that will sometimes, sometimes people will have some like mild Kriya movement, what you could describe as a Kriya movement. Excuse me. Sometimes people feel energy, most times people feel warmth and things like that. And I've also worked with quite a lot of, with a reasonable amount of people doing hands-on healing with people who are also going through Kundalini Awakenings. And in that scenario, then it's massively amplified. I feel like the two Kundalini energies, which are obviously one anyway, but just for the point of conversation, they kind of like sync together in a certain sense, and then it's just even more, and that can allow those people to like maybe move through, I guess in the same way that you said with where the mushroom like helped move through to something a little bit more. It's like lubrication for their process, and can just help shift through like a blockage that they might have been for whatever reason struggling to release. And it's what was I going to say? I feel like there was another bit to your question that I was going to answer, but I've forgotten.
It was mine was a bit of a shotgun blast. They always are. So it's don't feel like you have to address every component of it. But if it comes to mind, but yeah. On that same vein, that's interesting to me, and I'd imagine it would be very interesting having someone else. Yep, go.
I got it. Yeah. It was about like Shaktipat and like awakening somebody else's Kundalini. Yeah. So personally, I like that. So one person two people have come to me and asked for it. One of those people I just said like outright no to for various reasons. The other person had a Kundalini awakening and then it had shut down. And in that context, I basically just sort of set a really strong intention. We both set this intention of like, if this is the right thing for you right now, if this is like fully aligned, then I'm open to seeing if this can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, I've never consciously been involved in trying to activate anyone's Kundalini, and I personally, I don't think I would. Like if it's a after effect of like a session or some healing and something's happened, and I've just been in tune with spirit in that moment, then I trust that that's the right thing to happen. But I've got, maybe it's just because of how brutal my experience was, but I've got a lot of like, I feel like it's a big, big deal, like activating somebody's Kundalini.
It is.
Kundalini.
It's totally going to change their life. Yeah.
So I never have that intention. The only intention is to be like a clear channel for spirit. So therefore, if that does happen, then that's what God, source, spirit, whatever you refer to it, that's what's wanted and needed for that person. So that's my relationship to it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's sort of the only other alternative is like getting in the mind, I guess. You know what I mean? Because if it's going to come through that embodied thing and that sort of thing. I've just been curious and have probably been playing with it a bit in that space. But yeah, it does feel a bit like it's not something to even do that with, you know what I mean? But it's just felt to me, I've felt drawn to putting hands on other people, and so that element is I guess intuitive, but you have to be very conscious of the other person's experience. And I think the vast majority of the time, unless they have that pure intent like you had, or they're really dry wood ready to go, it's not gonna probably do it anyway. You know what I mean? They would have been probably someone who would be like one sneeze away, you know what I mean? Maybe you could, but it's apart from that, it's on that vein. Did you have a lot of the like non-physical stuff? Like, because I've just had a lot of through my process where it'll be like above the, just outside of, like, feel like it's working on the energy body almost, like like a lot of like moving just over the surface of things and different hands and then like all sorts of crazy gestures and mudras and things where it'll feel like it's working, like even like you I think you mentioned in one of your experiences that you were sort of moving it with your hands. That element it seems to be quite strong, you know what I mean? When it's doing something, it's like the hand will be synced up with how it's going on. That's interesting. Like, did you so you had that sort of thing go on?
Yeah. Like, I mean, at some points, it felt like when I was having these profound visionary experiences, especially with the crown chakra opening, it felt like there were these beings, these guides supporting me, and they were like somehow moving my fingers, which was then like these beams of light like coming off and like doing stuff in my system internally. So there's like that led to it. But a lot of times, absolutely. I mean, it's just like a constant thing of like pulling like things out of my throat or like doing some little thing and feeling it energetically in my head, pulling things out. So the hands very much involved on the aura, on the auric body, as well as like the physical stuff and the internal things. Yeah, absolutely.
Auric seems like the right word there. Like it's like that layer just on the outside of the body, and it'll often try grab something there, and pull is sort of like what you said. It feels like it comes into contact with something there, and then you can be doing motions over here that are manipulating that once you've grabbed it. Like there's really crazy that side to it.
I've also had like experiences of like pulling like what seemed like energetic objects out. There was one time that was very, very strong. Well, two examples pretty similar, but one time, like just knowing that I had to pull this thing out of my hand, it was like this massive like energetic spear being pulled out of like my heart, and I wonder if that was potentially like from a death in a past life, maybe. I'm open to like sometimes like a traumatic death like energetically sticks in the sort of in the soul. I'm open to that, because another time I had like I was just falling asleep and I saw this scene and a bullet coming towards me and just like going into my eye, and like I had to like, I woke up and was like just instinctively just drawn to like be pulling this object out. So I've had quite a lot of these kind of object things as well. and
Yeah, no,
spontaneous
that's
entity removals, which I've spoken about in other videos
yeah,
and things like that.
yeah. And I've seen that. I've seen your videos on that, and that's interesting. I haven't. I have had a couple of experiences that felt like there's an intuitive thing here, and it's hard. It crosses the boundary into being difficult to talk about. But yeah, I've had feelings like that. Like I could feel almost like a parasitic network of energy. We're having its hub in this left side here. You know what I mean? And having experiences where it felt like times that was being threatened and directly worked on, and it made it flare, and you know what I mean? Like you could tell it wasn't happy that it was having attention directed onto it. Like it wanted to be in the background. You know what I mean? And so I've had those sorts of experiences, but I haven't had any quite as direct as you're saying, and I haven't had the lucid dreams and that side of thing, which seemed like a really interesting component of your path. Again, remind people to check out your channel and all your videos there. They're really, you go into a lot of depth there, and you're a great storyteller, and it's a beautiful, beautiful resources there. And that's a good time to say, I really appreciate you making that stuff, James, because it was really authentic and not easy to talk about. And as you said, you know full well that, myself included, earlier on interpreted as you being crazy and all the rest. But come full circle, I've listened to those a lot when I've been going through tough times, and just hearing you recount your story and being like, okay, there's one other person that's been through this and they seem to still be alive. And you know what I mean? Like that's a grounding thing. And hopefully what we can salvage from this conversation, if not all of it, will be a good resource for people as well. And it's a beautiful thing to put that out there and be authentic and do that despite the consequences, and not really a lot of gain in this space that's pretty fringe. Do you know what I mean? Like you're not going to go mainstream with any of this, because it's a 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% that are really going to hear the message. But to that target audience, it hit home, and I'm sure you get lots of comments to that effect.
Well,
but
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. It's really, really beautiful to hear. And I think there was a barrier to doing it as well, around like there was a few reasons of like my desire to do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the big one was just to like help other people and put it out there so other people going on this, because I know there's quite a lot more stuff on, but when I first started going through this, there was barely anything on the internet about it, really. It was the odd blog post you might find. There might have been like one or two like little videos I found on YouTube. And then there was also an internal thing of, I recognized that there was it was a deepening into that, letting go of the fear of what other people think. I knew full well, especially once I uploaded it on my channel, which was previously called Revolution Love Evolve, and it had a lot of subscribers. I think it had like 40,000 subscribers at that point, and I'd just been.
I've seen a lot on there. There was great stuff. Yeah, you had the whole Terrence following, and
I've done all that stuff.
Yeah,
and I knew full well that there were obviously like some people were gonna like you said, just think, what the heck is this guy on about? Is
you were going to digitally clear the room, which is when you start telling the truth. You clear the room.
Yes, I was aware, and that was good, because I knew I had to. I knew by doing that it was practice for me to push through that as well, and be like really just an open, transparent book with like my experience of how it was, and knowing that would be really helpful for other people going through it.
Yeah, and it was, and it certainly was, and it resonated, and it's a beautiful resource. And so we'll direct people there, and also the ambient guitar stuff. I don't want to sleep on that. I've listened to that while going through, and it seems like it resonates from a similar sort of frequency there. You know what I mean? Those journeys, you can feel the depth in those soundscapes you create. I love that ambient soundscape sort of music, and that's a lot of what I listen to anyway. Electronic music and that sort of music, and you can feel the depth and the sorrow and the journey there. And I've had the pleasure of listening to those while going through the movements, even on a bit of psilocybin on occasion. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a deep thing there. You know what I mean? So those are really great as well. So that everything that you create from that space, I think, has a bit of a charge of the journey that you've been through, and you know what I mean. There's a shamanic thread there, and there's real depth there. So anything that you feel called to create on that same vein, I definitely would do so, because it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've actually got I've nearly finished a new album. I've got
Beautiful.
7 out of 9 tracks fully finished, and I'm just working on the
Nice.
last 3. So that should be either this year or early next year. I'll be releasing that, and it's kind of a follow up to the album Emanation, which was the first album I put out, and then I did a more drone based, more minimal album. I had this kind of like thing. I've got this like trilogy of albums: Emanation, Reverence, and the last one's probably either going to be called Liberation or maybe Enlightenment. I don't know, but anyway, it's like this series, and there's a whole like myth with it for me as well of what's going on in terms
Yeah.
of the album structure. But that's like also could totally like geek out on that side of
Yeah.
things. But yeah, I very much feel like resonate with what you're saying. I think that the album Emanation that I put out, so much of the experience was kind of conveyed and channeled into that album. I did it. I spent a year about just after, I think it was, I can't remember exactly, approximately 10 years after Kundalini Awakening, when I was almost ready to kind of step back out into the world. I
Yeah.
pretty much took a year to make that album, and there was part of me like thinking, well, I just there was just this drive to do it. Music was my massive passion before Kundalini Awakening, and there was a deep healing intention. Like as I'm recording, I'm like really trying to get in. Not trying, I'm getting into that really clear space to allow it to flow through. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. You can tell it in there, and some of the tracks are a real deep descent. You know what I mean? And it feels like it's looping and layering, and it's you can get lost in it. You know what I mean? And that feeling is very familiar with the whole Kundalini process, and it can feel like a never ending thing that you just have to surrender to. And there's a solemnness, and there's a real beauty to it. So you did well. I look forward to hearing the next one. Anything that you think that we should have touched on there that we didn't, James? Appreciate we've had a huge chunk of your time there, and it's been a great conversation. I've loved it. Hopefully the technical difficulties that we've had, I can still salvage the recording, but either way, I've enjoyed the conversation immensely, so I'm not upset.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's been great. I feel like we've covered all sorts of things there. We've covered enough. If anyone, you can. I've got there's my website and my YouTube channel if people want to look into more of my music and things like that, healing offerings, and the space that me and my partner Araya run, which if anybody's in the UK, in West Yorkshire kind of area, it's called Soul, SOUL, Soul Wellness Hub and Cafe, and it's a really beautiful space, and you can check out our website for that as well. We've got all sorts of beautiful offerings, ceremonies, day retreats, singing, yoga, you name it basically. We've got a lot of beautiful things going on there, and a really like beautifully developing community there as well.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and we'll put links to all of that stuff in there when we post this up. And it looks like a beautiful space you're creating there, and a real hub for community, and that's something that we didn't touch on, but it is a really, really integral part of this whole thing of finding ways to reintegrate into community and find your place within where you can contribute value and everything like that. So it seems like you've got a really good thing going there. It's sort of the next logical step. So look forward to seeing where that goes. And thanks again, James. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. I was just going to say one thing as well. I think just a little touch on that. Just I never really planned on doing, and I never planned on doing like having that space. I think one thing that I've really found, sort of, even I'll say after the most intense years of Kundalini, when I've come back into the world, and it's just been like there's just been this next step, and it's like opening out. I never was like, oh, I'm going to set up a wellness center and do all this. Life just like unveiled these things again and again. Same with the breath work that I do. It just kind of all opened up. So I think having that trust gained through the experience of the Kundalini, and then kind of bringing that into the world as well, and just surrendering and following the path that life wants to weave for you. That's how it's worked for me, sort of following on. So that's that's a really beautiful space to be in, to just be going along with the flow of life and seeing what it has to offer and open up for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's well said, and I look forward to seeing where it heads. And it was great to connect, and it was a beautiful conversation, James. So thanks heaps.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, pleasure.